Chapter 129. Lin Yin tilted her head slightly to look at Meng Qi and repeated her question. Meng Qi, if it were you, would you save him? Without waiting for Meng Qi's answer, she said as if talking to herself, I would save him, no matter what. She lowered her voice and said softly, I've been in the Starfall Sea for 10,000 years, and I just want him to live. What does the life of others have to do with me? Back then, no one cared about his death. Meng Qi was stunned. She felt that there was something wrong with Lin Yan's words, but she didn't know how to refute. The record she had read about Lin Yan in the books she had read only had the most touching side. There had never been a book that recorded that this profound realm great doctor, who had sacrificed herself to save so many people in ancient times, had even sacrificed her Tao companion. She wanted to save her Tao companion, which was not wrong. To put it bluntly, in exchange for Lin Yan's sacrifice for the 3,000 worlds, she could ask for more. If it were her, Meng Qi narrowed her eyes slightly. If it were her, what if the same thing happened to her? If she had the chance, she also had a way to save her Tao companion. Then would she go against the heavens, even if she had to be enemies with everyone in the world? Meng Qi's hands, which were hanging by her side, trembled slightly. Falling Heartwood, Blue Fall Yellow Springs Formation, puppet masters from 10,000 years ago. These thoughts slowly flashed through her mind. In fact, Meng Qi could guess what Lin Yan wanted to do. Using Falling Heartwood, puppet masters could refine living cultivators into puppets. With the Blue Fall Yellow Springs Formation, there was a chance to collect the remaining wills of the fallen people in the world. And then, Senior Lin Yan. Meng Qi frowned. But can you really revive your Tao companion with the Blue Fall Yellow Springs Formation? That's just a puppet, is it? Lin Yan chuckled. Meng Qi, have you forgotten that I collected the spiritual energy of so many living cultivators in the Starfall Sea? As she narrowed her eyes. I used Falling Heartwood to refine soul-snatching powder and collected the spiritual energy. She chuckled. In this way, it's not just a puppet. How could those mediocre puppeteers know these methods? I can truly and completely revive him and let him come back to the world. Meng Qi. Lin Yan reached out and gently tucked a strand of Meng Qi's hair behind her ear. Her fingertips glowed faintly as she gently pressed them on Meng Qi's forehead. Lin Yan's eyes glinted as she smiled faintly. You have the 5-spirit cauldron and my medical notes. You can be considered my successor. I haven't taken in any other disciples, and I don't have anyone to pass on my medical skills to. Her eyes were smiling, and her voice became gentle. Since you can pass the test and become my successor, you must be extremely talented in medical skills. So Meng Qi, if it were you, would you save him? Lin Yan asked again. She seemed to be particularly persistent with this question, repeatedly asking it several times. Although she was smiling, her gaze never left Meng Qi's face. She kept looking into her eyes, not wanting to miss the slightest change in her expression. Meng Qi opened her mouth. Her voice was slightly hoarse. Save? Or not? She stared blankly at Lin Yan. Meng Qi never thought that one day she would actually hesitate because of this question. She also never thought that the ancient medical cultivators could already touch the life and death of cultivators. This should be a part of the heavenly Tao's reincarnation. It was the Tao of immortality that almost all cultivators in the 3 realms pursued their entire lives. Meng Qi swallowed with some difficulty. If it were her, would she save him? Or not? She couldn't help but imagine. If the one who was injured and died was the cultivator closest to her, the one she respected the most, who would even sacrifice herself to let them live, such as Yin Qinyan, Meng Qi's back trembled, and she was suddenly shocked. If it really was Yin Qinyan, then would she save him? Even if she had to go against the heavens and become enemies with the heavenly Tao, even if she died, she would still save him. Meng Qi opened her mouth again. The answer was about to come out, but she felt that something was wrong. Lin Yan smiled sweetly and reached out to touch Meng Qi's face. Your heart has already told me the answer. Her fingers were slender and white, and her fingertips were very cold. When she touched Meng Qi's cheek, it was like ice, making her unconsciously shiver. Above Meng Qi's spiritual sea, the medical practice handbook suddenly swayed gently. Lin Yin withdrew her hand and turned her back to her. She seemed to be talking to herself. If I can't even save the person closest to me and the person I like the most, what's the use of my medical skills? Meng Qi didn't say anything. Above her spiritual sea, the medical practice handbook given by Lin Yin in the apricot forest swayed more violently, and it emitted a faint soft light. Probably because it saw its real owner, the medical practice handbook became more active in this forest. Before Meng Qi could check it, the medical practice handbook swayed faster and faster, and the light it emitted became brighter and brighter. Suddenly, a whole paragraph of text was directly imprinted in Meng Qi's mind without her reading it. So I have to save him. I must save him. Lin Yin, whose back was facing Meng Qi, was still talking to herself. I didn't do anything wrong, right? Meng Qi. Meng Qi's hands, which were hanging by her side, clenched and then slowly loosened. She raised her head and looked up, probably because she had already seen through them. Those illusions of Yun Qingyan, Xikong Xing, and others had already disappeared. At this time, only Lu Qingran and Pei Mufeng were left on the tree. They were tightly tied by Rot Tan and hung high on the tree. Both of their heads were hanging down, and they were still unconscious. In fact, as early as in the apricot forest, Meng Qi had already guessed that Lin Yin must also be good at formations. The entire grand competition was actually a set of huge, layered, exquisite Dharma arrays. Lin Yan's could stay in it and control the whole formation, which meant that she was very good at it. Of these two people, one is just a casual acquaintance of yours, and the other is someone you don't like. Lin Yin also raised her head. Meng Qi, if you are willing to help me, I will not only take care of the person you don't like for you. As she spoke, she raised her finger and pointed it at Lu Qingran. Her lips curved into a half-smile. I will also teach you this method. How about it? Elder Lin Yin, Meng Qi asked. I have a question. Ask away. Lin Yin smiled good-naturedly. You can ask anything you want, whether it's about cultivation or medicine. I don't have any other disciples. I will have to teach you all of this. Two small dimples appeared at the corners of her lips. She looked at Meng Qi with a gentle gaze, as if she really did treat her as her disciple. Her attitude was very good. When a cultivator dies, their consciousness collapses and disintegrates. When one's Ling energy disintegrates, even if the spiritual sea is damaged, it can still be repaired. But when one's consciousness completely collapses, it can still be repaired. Meng Qi asked, although the Tao of medicine talks about saving the dying and healing the injured, it has never said that people who have already died can still be resurrected in defiance of the heavens. The Tao of medicine. Lin Yin slowly repeated her words. As if she heard something funny, the corners of her lips curled up slightly, and she asked Meng Qi in return, who said it? Cultivators are originally walking in defiance of the heavens. The great Tao is difficult, and each step is filled with thorns. From qi condensation to foundation establishment, all the way to Mahayana and immortal ascension, every step forward is fighting against the heavens and going against the heavens. In the end, one can only ascend after breaking the Tao of heaven. Cultivation is defying the heavens, and the Tao of medicine is snatching people from the hands of the heavens. What do you think? She tilted her head slightly, looking innocent, but her gaze was somewhat cold and sharp. Do you want to go against the heavens? Meng Qi nodded. Lin Yin said again, what I want to do is just a bit more thorough. She looked up at the sky. The falling heart tree was tall and verdant, blocking the sky of the Starfall Sea. It also blocked the white-robed man who was standing on the leaf, as if he had also turned into a leaf, standing there silently. The Tao of heaven has never been fair. My generation has long been walking in defiance of the heavens. Now it's just a bit more thorough. Lin Yin chuckled. Her voice was originally very sweet, just like her entire person, looking delicate and charming. Now, however, it was tinged with a bit of cold mockery. Okay. Meng Qi's hands, which were hanging by her side, clenched again. Thinking of the words that appeared in the last volume of the medical handbook, a trace of determination flashed through her eyes. Meng Qi nodded. I'll help you. Her tone was still indifferent. Senior, what should I do? You were able to pass her test, so you should not only know medicine, but also Tao formations, right? Lin Yin asked. Yes. Meng Qi didn't hide it. I once followed a senior and learned Tao formations for a few years. You were able to pass her test in a few years. It seems that your talent in Tao formations is not inferior to your medical skills, Lin Yin said. Come with me, she said as she turned and walked deeper into the forest. Meng Qi followed obediently. She paid attention to the changes in the scenery on both sides. The falling heart tree grew taller and taller, blocking the sky and the sun, and the light in the forest grew dimmer and dimmer. Lin Yin took out a scale and held it in the palm of her hand. The scale wasn't big, but it emitted a faint fluorescent light, enough to illuminate the path ahead of the two. A faint fragrance wafted from the scale, a bit like the smell of the sea, with a bit of bitterness. The scale seemed small, but not long after Lin Yin took it out, the smell of the surging sea seemed to surround them. Meng Qi looked at it curiously, her eyes flashing. This is the sky dragon crystal. Lin Yin smiled and finished Meng Qi's words. You should be familiar with it. It is one of the materials needed to upgrade the five-spirit cauldron. I know. Meng Qi nodded and looked away. Using the sky dragon crystal as a light source. Even if this ancient great being had died 10,000 years ago, this action alone was enough to see her past glory. This was the material needed to upgrade the five-spirit cauldron, and it was also a rare water-type treasure. Do you know where the sky dragon crystal came from? Lin Yin glanced at her and asked as she walked. It is said that it comes from the Azure Dragon clan, a royal heavenly demon of the demon realm, Meng Qi said. The blazing feather comes from the phoenix, and the sky dragon crystal comes from the Azure Dragon. The blazing feather is relatively easy to obtain. After all, the phoenix has many feathers, but the sky dragon crystal. She blinked and continued. The Azure Dragon is a royal heavenly demon, and there are not many of them. Furthermore, the sky dragon crystal is their reverse scale. They only have one in their lifetime. Yes. Lin Yin nodded. And it requires the condensation of the primordial spirit. In other words, only Azure Dragons above the insightful Void Realm can have the Sky Dragon Crystal. The royal heavenly demons are extremely proud, and their reverse scales are hard to come by. If they can't send it back to their clan before they die, they are usually willing to destroy it rather than let it be obtained by outsiders. Therefore, the Sky Dragon Crystal is extremely rare in the world. Usually, only one piece is passed down in 100 years. After Lin Yin finished speaking, she stretched out her hand, and 4 complete pieces of the Sky Dragon Crystal lay in her palm. For my 5-spirit cauldron, he once went to the demon realm to find the Sky Dragon Crystal for me. As she spoke, the corners of her lips curled up slightly. She was extremely happy when she thought of the past. Back then, he went on a rampage with only one sword. He challenged the heavenly demon Azure Dragon clan with his sword and won 7 battles in a row. In the end, he obtained a total of 5 Sky Dragon crystals. She paused and said, I used 1 piece to refine the 5-spirit cauldron. Now I have 4 pieces left. Meng Qi did not say anything. The books had never recorded anything about Lin Yan's Tao partner. So she was a sword cultivator? In Lin Yan's era, the 3 realms had already been established. There was already a barrier between the demon realm, and the Trichiliocosm. It was not easy to travel to and from the 3 realms. Back then, the young man's Tao companion had traveled to the demon realm. With 1 sword in hand, he looked valiant and heroic. Even a heavenly demon royal like Azure Dragon had to admit defeat and willingly offer up a supreme treasure like the Sky Dragon Crystal. Meng Qi could not help but look at Lin Yin. She had a smile on her fair face. Her eyes were bright, and her eyebrows and eyes were smiling. It was no wonder she was willing to endure 10,000 years of loneliness. She wanted to stay in the Starfall Sea with her remnant will. Even if there was only a slim chance of survival, she wanted to save her Tao partner. Meng Qi narrowed her eyes. In her 2 lifetimes, The love between men and women she had seen the most was Lu Qingran and her suitors. Meng Qi actually did not understand what this feeling was. Lu Qingran had many suitors. No matter how close she was to a certain someone, every once in a while, there would always be a more outstanding suitor by her side. She would be together with this more outstanding suitor. In fact, Meng Qi also understood. A cultivator's life was too long. The path of cultivation was lonely and difficult. They would find a Dao partner to cultivate with. If they could support each other and walk side by side for a period of time, their fate might come to an end. Then there would be a new person. Meng Qi did not think much of it. It was just that Lin Yin now made her see another possibility. He had been infatuated with one person for 10,000 years. Even after he died, because he was unwilling to accept it, the will he left behind wanted to save her. This kind of feeling was actually quite heart-wrenching. Is he a sword cultivator? Meng Qi asked. Array cultivator and sword cultivator, Lin Yin said. I see. Meng Qi nodded. Lin Yin raised his eyebrows and chuckled. Like you, my Dharma arrays were all taught by him. Meng Qi. In these years, I have come into contact with many cultivators who have come to the Starfall Sea. Sometimes I would talk to them. I know that array cultivators have long declined. Sword cultivators and Dharma cultivators are everywhere. But 10,000 years ago, array cultivators were so strong that they could win against many of the same level. Then why did array cultivators decline? Meng Qi asked. She was really curious about this question. The strength of Ji Wujiong and Yun Qingyan both proved the strength of array cultivators. But now, the cultivators in the 3,000 worlds who understood Dharma arrays had all declined and become artifact cultivators. Artifact cultivators were far less powerful than the legendary array cultivators. And there were many books about ancient times in the 3,000 worlds, but it seemed that the existence of array cultivators had been deliberately erased. If she had not come into contact with Yun Qingyan and Ji Wujiong, Meng Qi would not have even heard of this name. There were many cultivators like her in the 3,000 worlds. Array cultivators were just a very unfamiliar name to them. Why did medical cultivators decline? Lin Yin turned to look at Meng Qi. In ancient times, medical cultivators were not weak. But I think you, the other two girls, and the two medical cultivators outside the forest are very weak. I'm not sure either. Meng Qi shook her head. Medical cultivators seem to have never been strong. There are no records of the ancient medical cultivators' combat strength in the books. Lin Yin sneered and looked up at the sky. A cold light flashed through her big eyes, as if she was looking at a certain place through the layers of trees. Compared to the other Lin Yin in the apricot forest, Lin Yin in the Starfall Sea had a much more perverse personality. Since my era, there have been very few medical cultivators who can break through the 9th grade and enter the mystic realm. Yes, Meng Qi said, you are the last mystic realm doctor. After you, there are no more mystic realm doctors in the world. Ah! Lin Yin raised her hand, and another leaf of the fallen heart tree fell into her palm. Then sword cultivators, magic cultivators, demon cultivators, and demonic cultivators. Are there any who can ascend to the Mahayana realm? I've never heard of it, Meng Qi said. I see. Lin Yin lowered her head slightly, staring at the fallen heart tree leaf in her hand, and fell silent. Above the forest, the white-robed man lowered his head slightly and looked at Meng Qi and Lin Yin in the forest. His expression also became serious. He kept walking with his hands behind his back, and a sharp light flashed in his eyes. In the forest, Meng Qi also stopped talking. She vaguely felt that there were many secrets hidden in the Starfall Sea. These secrets pointed directly to the heavenly Tao, which was something she had never thought of before. Lin Yin walked faster and faster, and the surrounding trees became taller and taller. The sky dragon crystal in her palm became brighter and brighter. In this small forest, it was like a rare treasure, illuminating the road ahead. We're here. After walking for about half an incense stick's time, the two came to a small open space. The open space was smaller than the open space where Pei Mufeng and the others were before. It was completely surrounded by a circle of tall fallen heart trees, like a wall. Only in the east, which was the direction Lin Yin came from with Meng Qi, there was a gap that only one person could pass through. Lin Yin raised her hand, and 4 pieces of the sky dragon crystal in her palm flew around and firmly embedded in the trunks of 4 trees. The small open space was illuminated. She took a step forward and made way for Meng Qi to enter. No matter where it was, the sky dragon crystal was a rare treasure. In an instant, in the Starfall Sea, within 1,000 miles of the Fallen Heart Forest, a low roar suddenly sounded. The roar came one after another, and some terrifying pressure instantly covered 1,000 miles, shrouding the Fallen Heart Forest. Humph! Lin Yin snorted coldly and opened her fingers. She didn't use spirit stones, but a large amount of spiritual energy that seemed to have substance poured out of her palm. Pure white spiritual energy rushed in all directions of the open space, and the complicated lines carved on the ground lit up one after another. Those rays of light rushed into the sky, as if they were reflecting the light of the stars in the sky, and instantly formed a curtain of light. Look! Sikong Xing, who was outside the forest, suddenly stood up and pointed in the direction of the forest. What's going on over there? This is... Su Junmo walked to her side. The light of a spell formation? He was a bit uncertain. They were a bit far away, and the light was too powerful. It had far surpassed the most powerful spell formation he had ever seen. It's a spell formation. Ji Wujiong looked up at the sky above the forest with a serious expression. The corner of his lips curled into a playful smile. It wasn't made by Meng Qi. She can't do it yet. It seems that there's a real expert inside. Li Che, Xue Qingxian, and the others looked at each other and saw a hint of worry in each other's eyes. Qin Xiuma and Chu Tianfeng stood up. The 2 of them simply raised their hands, and their life-bound long swords and magic treasures floated in the air, ready to attack at any time. Just at this moment, a terrifying pressure came from thousands of miles away and suddenly enveloped the entire sky above the forest. A strong expert has arrived. Su Junmo's expression became serious. In an instant, his primordial spirit condensed beside him. Something must have happened inside. Be careful. Where's Meng Qi? Sikong Xing's face was full of worry. She stomped her feet. How long has Meng Qi been gone this time? Why hasn't she come out yet? She'll be fine, right? Not for the time being. Ji Wujiong glanced at her, then looked up at the sky. That terrifying pressure seemed to glance at them, but its attention was more focused on the forest. A rare treasure has appeared. These guys have heard the news and come here. As he spoke, he raised his hand and pointed to the sky. Although his tone was not polite, it was still much better than Su Zijuan and the others. The important person inside can intimidate them. They don't dare to attack. Don't dare to attack? Xue Jinwen repeated these words, her eyes darting around. Could that legend be true? What legend? Sikong Xing hurriedly asked. I only saw it by chance in an ancient book, Xue Jinwen murmured. It was a medical manual left behind by a senior medical cultivator who had once been to the Starfall Sea. The manual was incomplete, and the medical knowledge was almost completely gone. Only 2 or 3 pages were left. As she spoke, she glanced at Ji Wujiao. This black-clothed man was undoubtedly the most mysterious and powerful among them, and he knew the most things. Continue, Ji Wujiong said lazily. Why are you looking at me? Xue Jinwen looked up at the sky. Have you all noticed that in the Starfall Sea, there has never been a beast with a cultivation higher than the one with the highest cultivation level attacking us? Everyone was stunned, and they quickly recalled the numerous battles they had experienced along the way. Everyone looked at each other, and then at each other. If they thought about it carefully, it seemed to be true. Although the snowtooth wasps were dangerous, it was because there were many of them. The snakes and wolves seemed terrifying, but they did not exceed the cultivation level of everyone. The Starfall Sea was said to be the most dangerous place in the 3 realms. Anyone below the spirit-severing stage who entered would die. The cultivators who had been here and managed to survive said that the beasts here were far stronger than those in the 3 realms. It was very dangerous, and poisonous gas and miasma were everywhere. If they were not careful, they would die. Since the formation of the Starfall Sea, many cultivators had indeed died here. There was no lack of insightful emptiness or even insightful truth realm experts. However, along the way, even if they were really at the edge of the Starfall Sea, they had never encountered a beast with a cultivation higher than the spirit severing stage. In an instant, everyone raised their heads to look at the sky. The terrifying pressure that crossed 1,000 miles in an instant was definitely not just at the spirit severing stage. It was very likely that it was a powerful expert who had just entered the insightful truth realm. However, they did not feel any killing intent. In other words, this terrifying existence was not coming for them. If that's the case, Su Junmo hesitated for a moment, but still said, I've also heard a similar rumor in the demon realm. It's said that in the Starfall Sea, the beasts will not attack cultivators whose cultivation level is lower than theirs. He paused for a moment and continued. However, the environment here is harsh and dangerous. The beasts here are stronger than those outside. Even if they are at the same cultivation level, they can still kill cultivators. Yes, Shui Jinwen nodded. She reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. In the medical practice manual left behind by the medical practitioner, there were only 2.5 pages left, and that was what he said. The powerful cultivators in the Starfall Sea, and even the beasts, will not attack cultivators whose cultivation level is lower than theirs. He said that he had a narrow escape. When he was about to leave the Starfall Sea, he encountered a strange beast that had just entered the insightful truth realm. He thought that he was dead for sure, but he didn't expect that the other party just glanced at him and left. That's very strange, Chu Tianfeng murmured. The weak are prey to the strong everywhere in the three realms. There has never been a rule that cultivators with a higher cultivation level are not allowed to attack cultivators with a lower cultivation level. Isn't the Starfall Sea a famous danger zone? Why is there such a rule? It doesn't sound like a danger zone, but more like a sex trial field. When Chu Tianfeng said this, everyone was stunned. Almost all of these people came from large sections. They were no strangers to the sex trial field. Basically, everyone had been there before. It was a place where the sect gave disciples experience. The opponents inside would be adjusted according to the cultivation level of the disciples who entered. In general, the opponents would not be higher than the disciples' cultivation level by more than a realm. This was a trial field built by the sect to cultivate disciples. Then what about the Starfall Sea? Chu Tianfeng raised his head to look at the sky. He didn't know whether that terrifying pressure was looking down on them or had no time to deal with them. It directly charged towards the forest in front of them. He gritted his teeth. The red lotus beside him suddenly flew up. Careful. Qin Xiaoma and he were becoming more and more in sync. As soon as he finished speaking, his life bond longsword also flew into the sky with him. The two were very careful, not daring to go too far. Everyone saw Chu Tianfeng's red lotus flash. A small red lotus flew into the sky. That small lotus quickly spun in a circle and suddenly exploded. Dozens of red petals flew into the surroundings. Qin Xiaoma's life bond longsword was the same. It slightly raised its head in the air. The tip of the sword pointed to the sky, ready to attack at any time. Ah! Xing's small Xiao suddenly exclaimed. Chu Tianfeng's small red lotus turned into smoke and dissipated in the air. Qin Xiaoma's longsword was steady and motionless. There was no reaction. How was it? Everyone's eyes focused on Chu Tianfeng. His face was slightly pale. The proud black-robed youth rarely showed such a helpless expression. He didn't counterattack. He waved his hand. His life bond magic treasure returned to his side, undamaged. Chu Tianfeng's atoms apple bobbed up and down. That's my attack seemed to have turned into nothingness, but he didn't take advantage of the situation to counterattack. Everyone fell silent. Ever since they entered the Starfall Sea, their journey had been very dangerous. When facing the snow-toothed bees, if Meng Qi hadn't descended from the sky, perhaps a few of them would have died and remained in the Starfall Sea forever. But wasn't this place the rumored danger zone? Could it be that the person in the forest is too powerful, so he doesn't dare to divert his attention to deal with us? Sikong Xing asked. Chu Tianfeng. He glanced at Sikong Xing and pursed his lips. His face suddenly flushed red, but he still gritted his teeth and said, if he really wants to kill me, he doesn't need to divert his attention. His opponent was a paradise-enlightened cultivator. Killing a nascent soul cultivator like him was about the same as crushing a bug. There really was no need to divert his attention. In other words, he would be completely obliterated in the blink of an eye. That's true. Su Junmo also raised his head and looked at the sky. Even if he wanted to kill us all, it would only take a flick of a finger. He wouldn't waste too much attention at all. If he really was afraid of the person in the forest, he would have killed any possible variables before making a move. For example, he would have killed us first. Ji Wujiong suddenly sneered. His arms were still crossed in front of his chest, and he looked at everyone with a smile that wasn't a smile. At least you have some self-awareness. You know that you're as insignificant as ants. But that's not me. If he wants to touch me, it won't be that easy. That's why. His back was ramrod straight, and his voice was full of mockery. If the sex of the 3,000 domains nurture people like you now, it's no wonder that the demon realm is restless and wants to swallow the entire 3,000 domains. Su Junmo, Chu Tianfeng. How could they forget this guy? His mouth was poisonous, but he could still fight. Damn it, they really miscalculated. What do you think the Starfall Sea is? What is the Three Realms? What is cultivation? Ji Wujiong looked around at everyone. A trial ground? Children playing house? He sneered. Go back and tell your elders that if you continue to nurture disciples like this, the 3,000 domains will really be swallowed up until not even bones are left. As Ji Wujiong spoke, he raised one of his hands. Even I'm a little tempted. Everyone's faces darkened, and no one paid him any attention. Speaking at this time was simply asking for humiliation. Then how do you explain? In the end, it was Sikong Xing who mustered the courage to speak. Since we entered the Starfall Sea, have we not encountered an opponent stronger than a spirit-severing stage? I don't need to explain. Ji Wujiong chuckled. If you want to believe your naive and stupid judgment, then believe it. In any case, the one who will die will not be me. Shui Jinwen's gaze fell on Ji Wujiong, and she suddenly asked, then why are you at ease letting Meng Qi enter this forest? Don't you want to take her as your disciple? If she dies here, won't your disciple be gone? Meng Qi is a little different from you, Ji Wujiong said lazily. Indeed, she won't die here, but it's not because of your reason that can't even fool a 3-year-old child. It's because the one in this forest is also... He narrowed his eyes slightly and said slowly, Lin Yin, and it's Lin Yin who will make Meng Qi doubt her medical skills. Ha ha! In the small open space in the forest, Lin Yin snorted coldly and looked up at the sky. It was not only that terrifying pressure. At this time, a little further away from them, there was also a very terrifying aura coming this way. However, just like the previous one, it stopped outside the Luo Exine Forest. Outside the forest, several terrifying auras stopped in the air. In the forest, Lin Yan's fingers moved faster. Countless spiritual auras overflowed from her palms. Later, not only her palms, but also her body and hair, there was a strong spiritual aura floating forward. On the open space, the last engraved line lit up. Blue Fall Underworld Formation. Meng Qi looked ahead. The complicated lines almost covered the entire open space. Not long after, the air began to be filled with a faint floral fragrance. The floral fragrance was slightly bitter and astringent, but if one smelled it carefully, it seemed to be sweet and fragrant. Just breathing it in could make people feel refreshed, and their limbs and bones seemed to be renewed and full of energy. Meng Qi took a deep breath and murmured, It's the Nirvana flower. The Nirvana flower also bloomed on the Nirvana tree. The Nirvana fruit was already very rare, and the Nirvana flower was even rarer. The Nirvana tree first bore fruit, and then bloomed. It was said that after the Nirvana fruit ripened, it would be plucked clean. The phoenixes of the heavenly demon royal family guarded the Nirvana tree for generations. Originally, only the territory of the heavenly demon phoenixes had Nirvana trees in the 3 realms. After the Nirvana fruit was plucked clean, the phoenixes guarding the nirvana tree would cry sadly. The tears would water the nirvana tree, and after 99 years, the nirvana flower would bloom in the phoenix's tears. A tree could only bloom 3 flowers at a time. Meng-Chi took a deep breath. If the nirvana fruit could save the life of a dying and seriously injured person, then the legendary nirvana flower could really save the life of a cultivator who still had a breath left. She looked at the center of the formation. In the spiritual aura light, 9 flowers bloomed one after another. The bright red petals did not look very eye-catching, but the fragrance of the flowers grew stronger and stronger. 9 flowers. Meng-Chi was also a little dazed. There would only be 9 flowers after 9 nirvana flowers bloomed. But this was not enough. In the air above Meng-Chi's spirit sea, Lin Yan's medical notes flashed. The contents of the last scroll quickly flashed through her mind. Sky Dragon Crystal, Nirvana Flower, Falling Heartwood, Blue Sky Yellow Springs Formation. This was not enough. In the air outside the forest, the terrifying presences that had just appeared suddenly became more restless. The sky became dark. Large dark clouds surged in this direction and quickly covered the starlight in the sky. The Fallen Heart Forest also became gloomy. Lin Yan looked up at the sky and smiled coldly. She waved her finger and drew a beautiful arc in the air. A small, glowing and translucent cauldron flew towards the center of the formation. 5 Spirit Cauldron, Meng-Chi exclaimed. Yes, Lin Yan said. This is my life bond talisman, and also your life bond talisman, 5 Spirit Cauldron. Lin Yan's 5 Spirit Cauldron looked only the size of a palm. The entire cauldron was sparkling and translucent, like colorful glass. It looked even more adorable in the light of Spirit Chi. This is... Meng-Chi turned to look at Lin Yan. Mystic Realm 5 Spirit Cauldron. Yes. Lin Yan raised her small chin and smiled proudly. Meng-Chi stared at the 5 Spirit Cauldron in a daze. It was not easy to upgrade a life bond talisman. In addition to the need for natural treasures, such as Brahma sand and Sky Dragon crystals, it was no longer a matter of materials to break through from the 9th grade to the Mystic Realm. It needed to be used many times. Tens of thousands of times was probably the minimum. Lin Yan had to use this 5 Spirit Cauldron to refine pills, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of times. Those pills had to save countless lives. The cultivator who used the 5 Spirit Cauldron had to have a firm Tao heart, be undistracted, and wholeheartedly pursue the great Tao of medical cultivation. Only then would there be hope to break through from the 9th grade to the Mystic Realm. Meng-Chi stared blankly at the palm-sized, glowing, and adorable 5 Spirit Cauldron. Was this the first time in her lifetime? She had never thought that one day she would be able to see with her own eyes a Mystic Realm life bond talisman that only appeared in the legends of medical cultivators. Senior Lin Yan was truly benevolent and merciful. He deserved to be called a Mystic Realm Great Doctor. Meng-Chi turned her head and looked at the sweet smile on Lin Yan's face. She suddenly felt a lump in her throat. Such a powerful and kind senior who would sacrifice himself for people he didn't know couldn't save his Tao companion in the end. She must be in great pain and discomfort. Senior Lin Yan. Meng-Chi cupped her fists and bowed to Lin Yan. What should I do? She paused and said in a low voice, Senior, I'll do whatever you ask. Good girl. Lin Yan looked at Meng-Chi with a smile. She chose you as her successor. Even I like you very much, let alone her. She suddenly sighed and said, You've already read the last volume of the medical manual, right? Yes. Meng-Chi responded in a low voice. The cultivators of the 3 realms may have different spiritual seas and different cultivation methods, but they all have one thing in common. Everyone has an internal core. Core formation is the first step on the path of cultivation. After core formation, there's the concept of divine sense. Then the nascent soul will give birth to the spirit. Only when the spirit is divided can a strand of divine sense be divided. Only when the internal core is endlessly growing can a cultivator's internal core be endlessly growing, Lin Yan said. Meng-Chi nodded. This was written in the book. Previously, when her 5 Spirit Cauldron absorbed the cold energy of the snowtooth bees, Her internal core froze, and she couldn't move. Even if she was conscious, she couldn't control her body at all. Labik. Net therefore, if the spiritual sea was damaged, it could still be repaired. If the internal core was also completely damaged, the cultivator would die, and their Tao would disappear. Meng Qi also knew that when Lin Yin fell to the insightful emptiness realm and couldn't advance in her life, it was because she used too much energy to save the 6 cities and 8 towns that her internal core was damaged. It wasn't that medical cultivators hadn't thought of reviving the dead, but if the internal core was completely damaged, there was no way to rebuild it. Meng Qi stood outside the formation with her hands by her side. The fragrance of the nirvana flower filled the air, and the 4 sky dragon crystals around her shone with a jade-like light. This still wasn't enough. Her palms were sweaty, and she became extremely nervous. Meng Qi also believed that no medical cultivator wouldn't be nervous or moved in such a situation. Lin Yin flicked her finger, and a dozen or so green spirit herbs flew towards her 5-spirit cauldron. The palm-sized cauldron swallowed all the spirit herbs in an instant. This is... Meng Qi looked over and instantly realized. Yellow spring grass. This was a little grass that only existed in the Mo world. Supposedly, it only grew in the darkest and coldest places of the great Mo realm. Yellow spring grass had no other use, but if a Shioja's consciousness was injured, only yellow spring grass could heal it. If it could injure a Shioja's consciousness, then the internal core would basically be damaged, so it was rarely used. However, compared to the nirvana flower and the sky dragon crystals, yellow spring grass was not as precious. Lin Yin smiled slightly. In the 5-spirit cauldron, the yellow spring grass suddenly surged. There were clearly only a dozen or so little grass, but black mist came out of the small cauldron and completely swallowed the yellow spring grass. The black mist quickly dissipated, leaving behind a few drops of green spirit herb essence in the 5-spirit cauldron. Only then did the fragrance of the herbs spread out. The cold and bitter smell of the grass instantly surpassed the fragrance of the nirvana flower and filled the air. Meng Qi inhaled. That feeling was like she was in the darkest and coldest place, and her entire person was wrapped in a sticky and cold mist. Her mind moved slightly, and she turned to look at Lin Yin. The other's fingers were lightly moving in the air like he was plucking the strings of a zither, elegant and enchanting. 3 or 4 kinds of Ling medicines flew towards the 5-spirit cauldron. Your 5-spirit cauldron is inscribed. Lin Yin tilted his head slightly. The Great Leaf Fire Formation? Yes, Meng Qi said. The person who taught you the formation is very good to you. Lin Yin smiled faintly. The Great Leaf Fire Formation is the best fire formation in the 3 realms, and is perfect for making medicine. But not all damn medicines need to be made with fire. Meng Qi nodded. All 5 spirits can be used to make medicine, Lin Yin said. Meng Qi's mind moved slightly. The wondrous use of the 5-spirit cauldron is here, she said. When you refine it to the point where it has all 5 spirits, then you can use all 5 to make medicine. This way, you can multiply the effects of the same damn medicine. Do you understand? Meng Qi suddenly understood. The black mist just now was earth, Lin Yin said without reservation. Look again. Meng Qi hurriedly turned to look at the 5-spirit cauldron. Lin Yin tapped lightly with his finger, and a clear spring surrounded the 5-spirit cauldron, tempering the herbs she had just put in. In the clear spring, the herbs gradually melted into a ball and finally condensed into a small piece of transparent water-like essence. So every time the 5-spirit cauldron advances, you can inscribe a new formation on it. Do you understand? Lin Yin said. Understood. Meng Qi nodded heavily. She had just finished nodding when a wave of bitterness suddenly surged in her heart. Would she be able to wait until that day? Lin Yin taught her this without reservation, just because he liked her. The two could be considered strangers meeting by chance. Including the time in the apricot forest, it was only the 2nd time they had met. And obviously, this Lin Yin didn't know what happened in the apricot forest. She only inferred that Meng Qi had seen her other self in the apricot forest from the 5-spirit cauldron and her medical notes. Meng Qi could not see the last volume of the medical notes before, but now she could see it. There was only one method recorded in it, and it was a method that Senior Lin Yin had never tried in his medical career: reviving the dead. Even if a cultivator's Niden was damaged and they died, according to that method, there was a chance for them to come back to life. It was clearly recorded in the medical manual. It needed the blue sky underworld formation as the main formation. Then it needed to use the blue sky dragon crystal to guard the formation and seal the consciousness that wanted to be repaired by the yellow spring grass. The consciousness from different cultivators would be drawn out of their bodies by the falling heartwood. In the blue sky underworld formation, it would be attracted by the nirvana flower fragrance and repaired with the yellow spring grass. Then, the leaves of the falling heartwood, in addition to being the #1 hallucinogen in the 3 realms, could also give the reunited consciousness all the memories of the cultivator that Lin Yin wanted to revive. Then, it was to rebuild the spiritual sea. Meng Qi turned to look at Lin Yin. The other party opened his palm, and a total of 9 pieces of starlight bigger than a fist flew into the formation. The starlight was the star dust that had been refined and could repair the spiritual sea. In contrast, the physical body needed to revive the cultivator was the easiest for a profound realm doctor like Lin Yin. She flicked her finger, and dozens of pills flew into the air. As long as the other party still had a bone left, she could revive the dead, regrow flesh and bones, and give the other party a complete body. Sure enough, Lin Yin took out a small box carefully. As soon as the slender white box was taken out, Meng Qi felt cold air blow against his face. Lin Yin held the small box with both hands and gently closed his eyes. "Long time no see," he said softly as he gently opened the box. Inside the box was a human finger bone. There was only a small section of it, and it was lying quietly inside. "Meng Qi." Lin Yin looked at his 5-spirit cauldron in front of him and said softly, "This was the last thing that belonged to him that I found when I rushed there." Her lips trembled slightly, and big drops of tears suddenly rolled down her face. Lin Yan's lips were still slightly raised. He still looked like he was smiling, but there was no longer any smile in his eyes. "What was written about me in the book?" he suddenly asked. "It said that in order to save the people of the 6 cities and 8 towns, you exhausted all your cultivation and damaged your spiritual sea and inner core. Your cultivation fell from the Mahayana realm to the insightful emptiness realm, and it would be difficult for you to advance in your life. Insightful emptiness realm cultivators, even Mahayana cultivators, couldn't live forever. Only by breaking through to the Mahayana realm and ascending to immortality could one have an endless lifespan." Lin Yin was already seriously injured after this battle. Adding on the fact that her cultivation fell by 2 great realms. Although she was a medical cultivator, her body never recovered. She was originally a genius in cultivation. When she was 200 years old, she officially stepped into the Mahayana realm. However, when she died, she was only 300 years old. This was shorter than the lifespan of most insightful emptiness realm cultivators, and even spirit-severing realm cultivators. "Oh," Lin Yin answered casually, as if he didn't care too much about this. "Do you know who he is?" she said faintly, her slender fingers gently stroking the small knuckle. Meng Qi shook his head. There wasn't a single book that recorded Lin Yan's life that mentioned that she had a Tao companion in love. The Lin Yin she knew was simply a perfect person who didn't eat the food of mortals. She looked at the other person, carefully holding the cold jade box and gently touching the small finger bone. She looked at the tears on Lin Yan's long eyelashes, at the other person's slightly red eyes and the tip of the nose. Meng Qi suddenly felt that this kind of senior Lin Yin looked much more adorable and real than what was recorded in the books. "His surname is Xiao," Lin Yin said. "Surname Xiao?" Meng Qi frowned. Most of the names of the powerful people in the ancient times were recorded in the books. For example, Lin Yin, surname Xiao. In the same era as Lin Yin, there was someone surnamed Xiao. Wait. Meng Qi's eyes widened. "Xiao Lang? Is he called Xiao Lang?" "Yes." Lin Yin nodded with a smile. Her face was full of tears. The corners of her lips were already slightly raised, revealing a sweet, even somewhat proud smile. Meng Qi sucked in a breath of cold air. She looked at the small finger bone in the cold jade box. Lin Yan's Dao companion was actually Xiaolang. This senior was very controversial. From ancient times to the present, from the ancient times to the present, the entire 3,000 worlds. No, he was recognized as the most talented sword cultivator in the three realms. He formed his core at the age of 11. At the same time, his sword spirit was born. It was said that at that time, his sword chi swept through the sky, and within 100 miles, sword marks were left behind, causing a sensation in the three realms. Compared to him, the genius swordsmen of the present era, such as Pei Mufeng, were a little inferior. At the age of 19, he was already at the peak of the spirit-severing stage. He went deep into the devil world alone and fought for 7 days and 7 nights. During the battle, he advanced to the insightful emptiness stage. His killing intent filled the sky, and the younger generation of the devil world at that time lost their fighting spirit at the mention of Xiaolang. However, Xiaolang was also very controversial. He was arrogant and unruly, crossing the three realms and doing things alone. Many seniors didn't like this proud young man. Meng Qi had never heard that Xiaolang actually had a Dao companion, and it was Lin Yan, a profound realm doctor. It's actually Senior Xiaolang. Meng Qi was startled and murmured, "It's never been written in the books." The three realms never lack people who like to gossip. The romantic history of the past Yao lords, the domestic struggles of the masters of the devil world, the love and hate of the powerhouses of the three realms. There was never a lack of markets since ancient times. Only this Xiaolang had never been recorded in these records. Yes, Lin Yin nodded with a smile. Because I don't like people talking about us like this. Meng Qi. No wonder. With the sword in Senior Xiaolang's hand and his fiery temper, if he didn't want to, no one in the three realms would dare to say anything behind his back. Senior Xiaolang? Meng Qi lowered his eyes and looked at the cold jade box that Lin Yin carefully held in his hand. Lin Yin was startled for a moment. She seemed to have no more worries about Meng Qi. Or perhaps because her wish was about to be fulfilled, she was in a very good mood. She said everything she knew. At that time, someone received news that the devil world was going to slaughter everyone in the 6 cities and 8 towns of the southern land. The southern land has always been inferior to the eastern land, let alone the western land. The 6 cities and 8 towns they chose were not large cities and towns guarded by large sections. It felt more like they were killing people for fun. When I received the news and rushed over, the poisonous miasma had already spread all over the land. At that time, everyone actually had a debate about whether to protect the 6 cities and 8 towns or just protect the protectors. Lin Yin smiled bitterly, because if they wanted to save them, they had to use a profound realm medical cultivator in exchange. And I was the only profound realm medical cultivator at that time. But you still chose to save them, Meng Qi said softly. No matter how many debates there were at that time, Lin Yin still chose to save them in the end. I also regretted it, Lin Yin said indifferently. She gently stroked the small finger bone again. The devil world didn't slaughter ordinary people for fun. They did it to deal with him. Deal with Senior Xiaolang? Meng Qi was startled. She immediately reacted. They did it on purpose. In fact, they used the lives of the 6 cities and 8 towns to bait you, and then used Senior as bait, Lin Yin said. They used me as bait to bait Xiaolang. She lowered her head and gently stroked the small finger bone again. And I didn't know anything. I didn't know that he was fighting for me. I didn't know anything. I didn't know that in the end, I could only... Her tears suddenly fell drop by drop, landing on the small finger bone. Lin Yan's voice was choked with sobs. When I finally found him, all he left for me was... Meng Qi stared blankly at the scene in front of her. So there was such a soul-stirring story behind it. She suddenly understood why Senior Lin Yan's could still remain in the Starfall Sea after 10,000 years. Apart from the help of the formation and the falling heart wood, it was probably her belief that she had to save Senior Xiaolang that kept her will from dissipating. Meng Qi looked around. Sky dragon crystals, nirvana flowers, yellow springs grass, starlight. These were indeed rare, but so what? If it were her, she would also do everything to find these. Even if she had to go against the heavens, even if she fell into an abyss of eternal damnation, she would definitely do everything she could to save Senior Xiaolang. This was Meng Qi only felt a chill on her face. She raised her hand and touched her cheek, only to find that her tears had already rolled down at some point. Was this the love between a man and a woman, the so-called deep love written in books? In the five-spirit cauldron, the spirit herbs that Lin Yin had thrown in the end were wrapped in a green leaf full of vitality. The leaves of the falling heart would gradually merge with these spirit herbs and finally turned into a cloud of smoke that completely disappeared into the Yellow Springs grass. The starlight flew into the sky Yellow Springs formation and surrounded the five-spirit cauldron. But Elder, Meng Qi could understand these arrangements and naturally knew what Lin Yin wanted to do. Is Senior Xiaolang, who was saved like this, really him? Lin Yan's remaining will had been preserved for 10,000 years. Whether it was in the apricot forest or here, it was due to the help of formations and treasures. There was a large forest of falling heartwood here. In the apricot forest, there was the sacred item of medical xiao since ancient times, the apricot tree. That represented life. Adding on the help of formations, it was possible to preserve Lin Yan's remaining will. But Xiaolang had died long ago, and his consciousness had dissipated into the world. Even if Lin Yan really could revive the dead and regrow flesh and bone. But the other's consciousness had been pieced together by the Yellow Springs grass that she had taken from so many Xiaojia's consciousness. Even his last memory had been given to him by Lin Yan. Was this still Xiaolang? Without Xiaolang's own Niden, everything was nothingness. Meng Qi's hands that were hanging by her side clenched and then relaxed. It wasn't that she didn't know what Lin Yan needed her to do. Right now, everything was ready. She still needed the Niden of a Xiaojia that was still alive, but it was impossible to take the Niden by force. Even if she used the leaves of the falling heartwood to confuse the other, there was no way to take out the Niden, unless you were willing to take out your own Niden with your own hands. This was something that only medical cultivators could do. So Lin Yin should have collected all these treasures a long time ago and been waiting for a suitable person to appear. This person had to be willing to give her their Niden and also had to be a medical xiao and understand formations. It was too difficult to put all these conditions together. Lin Yin should have been preparing for this moment when he discovered that Meng Qi had the 5-ling cauldron in his medical letter. Elder Lin Yin. Meng Qi turned to look at this senior medical xiao that she respected the most. Can I ask another question? Speak. Lin Yan's gaze became slightly bright. Did you already discover that I had the 5-ling cauldron and the medical letter from the moment I entered the Starfall Sea? Lin Yan gently closed her eyes, and the corners of her lips curled up, even earlier. Although I can't leave the Starfall Sea, she is still me. Since we are all in the 3 realms, I naturally know that someone passed her test and became her successor. Older sister Shui. Meng Qi paused. Were you the one who captured her into the Starfall Sea? You have a very powerful person by your side. Lin Yin didn't answer Meng Qi's question and muttered to herself. It's really amazing that someone of the younger generation can have his cultivation and talent. Was it Yin Qingyan? Meng Qi's heart jumped. Was Elder worried about him before? Meng Qi asked. It's not really a worry. Lin Yan's tone was indifferent. Her eyelashes were still wet from her previous tears, but her tone became calm. The Starfall Sea seems to have something to do with him. I just don't want to cause too much trouble. But what if I don't leave him? Meng Qi asked. Lin Yin suddenly curled her lips into a charming smile. Meng Qi. She reached out and pinched Meng Qi's face. I've waited for 10,000 years, so I won't be in a hurry. Besides, you will leave. Lin Yan's gaze passed over Meng Qi's shoulder and looked behind her. This was already the center of the forest, and she clearly couldn't see Su Junmo and the others waiting outside the forest. I can feel that these people have an opportunity with you. You won't leave them alone. Then, Elder, why are you so sure that I will definitely come here with you? Meng Qi asked again. Because you're also a medical cultivator. Lin Yin looked at Meng Qi and smiled sweetly. At this moment, her smile really came from the bottom of her heart, and there was a kind of tacit understanding and pride. If I know that someone has a way to bring the dead back to life, even if I don't want to resurrect someone right now, I will definitely go and take a look. Lin Yin said matter-of-factly. How could I possibly resist? Meng Qi, did you tell me Elder Xiao Lang's story to make me willingly give you my inner core? She asked again. Inner core? Give it to me? Lin Yin seemed to have heard something shocking. No, no, no. She quickly waved her hand. Meng Qi, I don't want your inner core. She reached out and pinched Meng Qi's cheek again. You are my only successor, and even the 5 spirits cauldron was passed on to you. How could I bear to hurt you? Lin Yin said. Didn't I say before that I wouldn't hurt you? Huh? Now, it was Meng Qi who was stunned. If you don't want my knighting, then you— Lin Yin suddenly waved his hand. The vines in the forest were completely obedient to her. In the blink of an eye, a green vine sent a person to her side. Lu Qingran, who was dressed in pink, still had her head lowered. Her eyes were closed, and she was unconscious. I've been here for 10,000 years, and I haven't been idle. It's just that I'm just a wisp of will, and there are many things I can't do. Therefore, I need you. I need the 5 spirit cauldron. I need the person who will pass on my legacy to help me. Lin Yin chuckled and glanced at Lu Qingran. It just so happens that you don't like her. She's also a medical cultivator. We'll just use her knighting, she said in a matter-of-fact tone. Chapter 130. Western Jie, Broken Sky City. This was considered one of the biggest cities in Western Jie. The streets and alleys were like a spider web. The streets were bustling with people. The 2 busiest streets in the main city intersected, evenly dividing Broken Sky City into 4 parts. It was also the busiest place in the entire city. Broken Sky City was one of the rarer places in the 3,000 worlds. The sect was in a city within the city. The northwest part of the city that was divided into 4 parts by the 2 main streets was where Broken Sky Sect was located. Compared to the other 3 areas, this place was much quieter. Under the heavy eaves, Broken Sky Sect disciples could be seen walking in groups of 2s and 3s. The disciples that walked together mostly wore clothes of the same color. They were very familiar with each other. But when they met other disciples in the sect, their attitudes were much colder. At this time, 5 disciples wearing the same dark green robes hurriedly walked into Broken Sky Sect. You're back. Not long after they entered the gate, someone greeted them. How was it? Xiao ran shitty. Did you find anything? The youngest of the 5 disciples, and also the most handsome disciple, cupped his hands towards the other. Greetings, Xiao. He paused, and then said, I found something. Oh, that disciple asked. Let's hear it. Xiao, we need to greet Shizun first. Xiao Ran smiled slightly at that person. That smile was warm and polite, making people unable to get angry. The person that greeted him looked Xiao Ran up and down, laughed coldly, and turned to leave with the other sect members. Xiao Shitty. The young Shoujo on Xiao Ran's left said, Do you think we— Xiao Ran made a shushing gesture towards him. Xiao, we will go see Shizun first. The 5 people nodded silently and quickly walked into the depths of the sect. Broken Sky Sect originally took up a quarter of Broken Sky City. But only people who entered here would find that this place was much bigger than it looked from the outside. Xiao Ran and the others did not walk slowly, but they still took a stick of incense's time to walk into the depths of the sect. There was a green bamboo forest. The moment they stepped in, they felt a chill in their faces. Their hearts seemed to become peaceful. In the middle of the bamboo forest, there was a bamboo house built along the way. The bamboo house was simple. Other than looking spacious, there was no extra decoration. Shizun. Xiao Ran stood outside the bamboo house and bowed respectfully with his senior brothers. Disciple Xiao Ran. The bamboo forest was quiet for a moment. Then, a middle-aged man in a dark green robe pushed open the door and walked out with a soft creak. The man looked to be about 40 years old. A long robe was casually draped over his shoulders, and a few strands of hair hung down to his temples. His eyes were deep, and he looked extremely handsome. He glanced at his 5 disciples and asked, How is it? They hurriedly bowed to the middle-aged man. Xiao Ran stepped forward and reported, Master, when we went to the east border this time, we found out that Meng Qi came from Cool Breeze Valley, which is located next to Cool Breeze Town. It's a very small sect in the east border, and the sect master is only at the Gold Core realm. Hearing this, the middle-aged man frowned slightly. A Golden Core stage sect leader? Yes. Xiao Ran's tone was still very calm. Cool Breeze Valley is only a small sect. Cool Breeze Town is located at the intersection of the Demon Realm and the 3,000 Worlds. There are very few residents, and there are not many disciples in the sect. Medical cultivation in the east border is only slightly better than in the south border. After the disciples of Cool Breeze Valley leave the sect, most of them return to the town and practice medicine as ordinary doctors. Yes, the middle-aged man responded in a low voice. A few months ago, Meng Qi left Cool Breeze Valley. Burning Sky Palace once invited her, but Meng Qi rejected the good intentions of the young master of Burning Sky Palace. Until now, she has not joined any sect. Young master of Burning Sky Palace. The middle-aged man pondered for a moment. Chu Tianfeng? Among the younger generation of Xiuzhe, Chu Tianfeng could barely be considered to be outstanding. As for Burning Sky Palace, it could be ranked in the top 10 in the east border. Only now did the middle-aged man nod slightly and say to Xiao Ran, "Continue." Yes. Xiao Ran continued. This year's Medical Cultivation Conference was held in Descending Star City. At that time, Su Junmo and another young red-clothed female demon cultivator were accompanying her. Her name is Sikong Xing. Sikong should be from the Red Fox tribe. The middle-aged man nodded carelessly. He did not care much about Sikong Xing. Su Junmo is with her. The corner of his lips suddenly curled up slightly. A trace of sarcasm flashed across his eyes. Shuechuan has always wanted to marry this demon realm emissary and marry their Shui family's genius princess to Su Junmo. When he spoke, other than Xiao Ran, the remaining 4 disciples all lowered their heads. They were extremely obedient and quiet. At this moment, when they heard the man's cold laugh, their hands that were hanging by their sides slightly tightened. Even if it was the Shui family's most favored princess, if Master wanted to, the middle-aged man was originally standing by the railing outside the bamboo house. His slender fingers lightly tapped on the railing a few times. Continue. Taoist Meng accompanied Su Junmo and Sikong Xing to Descending Star City to participate in the Medical Cultivation Conference. She was also the first medical cultivator to pass the test in the apricot forest in thousands of years. Xiao Ran said, the disciples of the third senior uncle participated in the test in the apricot forest. They even spoke to Taoist Meng and fought side by side with her. I know. The man casually replied, I've already asked them. I've asked my friends who were in the apricot forest that day. It was said that at the end of the day, the sky above the apricot forest was like a mirror. Tens of thousands of medical cultivators from the 4 realms, including the elders of the 10 great medical sects and the younger generation of disciples, all saw Taoist Meng pass the test with their own eyes. Xiao Ran paused. Taoist Meng was personally acknowledged by the ancient mystic realm great Dr. Lin Yan as her friend. This news had already spread throughout the 4 realms. A few days after the Medical Cultivation Conference ended, Xiao Ran and the rest could hear discussions everywhere they went. It was the same in the heavens beyond heaven. The appearance of an ancient mystic realm great doctor was a big deal to the entire 3 realms. Especially Lin Yin, the last mystic realm great doctor among the medical cultivators. This genius medical cultivator, who had the potential to become an earth realm great doctor and even become an immortal, had personally acknowledged Meng Qi as his friend. Just this point alone was enough to shock countless people. Xiao Ran had followed his master to the heaven-class auction house in the heavens beyond heaven. The sect masters and elders of the major sects were all talking about Meng Qi at that time. And what benefits did Meng Qi obtain from the apricot forest? Although Xiao Ran's master, the middle-aged man Ling Ji, had heard this more than once, the corners of his lips gradually softened. Even his voice was gentler than before. I already know about this. When I was in Descending Star City, someone from the southern border came to look for me. After I sent someone to investigate, I found out that the black-clothed man beside fellow Taoist Meng was the youngest disciple of the Southern Border's cloud-crushing peak sect master. He suffered a chi deviation during his tribulation and fell into the Eastern Border. I don't know why he's with fellow Taoist Meng. Cloud-crushing peak. Ling Ji's slender fingers tapped on the bamboo railing a few times, a sect that cultivates both sword and technique. It's one of the top 3 sects in the Southern Border. Yes, Xiao Ran said respectfully. I don't know why fellow Taoist Meng fell into the Starfall Sea. This is the future sect master of Cloud-Crushing Peak, the young master of Burning Sky Palace, Su Junmo, Sikong Xing, and he said, the eldest son of the Shui family, Shui Qingxian, Songhai Academy's Li Che, and Starfall Pavilion Su Zijuan should all be with fellow Taoist Meng. Not enough. Ling Ji said faintly, they're indeed the best of the younger generation, but they're not enough to get out of the Starfall Sea. Xiao Ran said nothing. He looked down and saw the hem of his master's robe. Probably because the robe had been worn for many years, it was already a bit old. The man wearing it obviously didn't care about this, and no one would care if Ling Ji's robe was old or new. Because no matter who it was, as long as they heard the name Ling Ji of the Broken Sky sect, the first thing they would think of would always be his sword. Has the Great Hall reached a conclusion? Ling Ji asked faintly. Xiao Ran pondered for a moment, then said, not yet. He paused, then said, eldest martial uncle said, although 10 years ago when Grandmaster passed away, everyone swore that only the person who took revenge for Grandmaster has the right to take the position of sect master. But now is a special time, and the sect is about to regain its ancient power. If everyone is still like this, the sect will only miss this opportunity. Xiao Ran thought for a moment, then said, when I left, the Great Hall was already arguing about this. When I returned to Broken Sky City today, I heard from Senior Marshal Brother that the Great Hall was still arguing about this matter. Yes, Ling Ji answered casually. He knocked on the bamboo railing again, and the thick yellow bamboo pole made a controlled sound. In this picturesque bamboo forest, the sound could travel very far. Ling Ji asked again, what did the elders of the Medical Cultivator Alliance say? They have never argued with sword and magic cultivator sects, and didn't say much this time. They only said that if they found fellow Taoist Meng, they would naturally give the Broken Sky sect an explanation. Heh, Ling Ji's laughter became more and more sarcastic. They didn't give us an explanation. They spent thousands of years and still couldn't find out the secret of the apricot forest. A small Jinan medical cultivator, without a sect, actually obtained the biggest benefit of the apricot forest, and they were also unwilling. Meng Qi falling into the Starfall Sea. Maybe. He tilted his head slightly and walked out of the bamboo house with his hands behind his back, then walked out of the bamboo forest. Is not a bad thing. Xiao Ran and the others hurriedly followed. Other than him, the other 4 disciples looked at each other. Falling into the Starfall Sea, this famous danger zone of the 3 realms, was not a bad thing. If they couldn't even save their own lives, what was the point of talking about other things? However, they didn't dare to say anything. They only silently followed behind Ling Ji with Xiao Ran and walked towards the sect's main hall. There were many disciples of the Broken Sky sect standing in the plaza outside the main hall. Before Xiao Ran and the others reached the main hall, they could already hear a rumbling sound coming from inside. They knew that this was an argument between insightful emptiness realm experts and above. For disciples like them, who didn't have enough cultivation, they couldn't hear what they were saying at all. They could only hear the thunderous sound. The disciples in the plaza outside the main hall saw Xiao Ran and the others, especially Ling Ji, who was walking at the front. They all opened their eyes wide in shock. A few disciples who were closer to Ling Ji had already quickly bowed towards him. Martial Uncle Ling, Martial Uncle Ling. Good morning, Martial Uncle Ling. For a moment, the plaza was filled with people bowing and greeting. Ling Ji only had 9 direct disciples. Currently, Xiao Ran and the others were in the sect. There were at least 100 people standing in the plaza outside the main hall. No matter who these Broken Sky sect disciples were under, they didn't dare to show any disrespect in front of Ling Ji. Probably because he heard the greetings of the disciples. The loud rumbling sound in the main hall suddenly quieted down. The door of the main hall suddenly opened. An old and solemn voice sounded. "Old Seven, you came at the right time. Come in." Ling Ji took a step forward, and the next step was through the door of the main hall. The disciples in the plaza all bowed their heads respectfully. They didn't even dare to breathe loudly. When the door closed again, the disciple closest to Qiao Ran quietly raised his head and asked him softly, "Junior brother Qiao Ran, why do I feel that martial Uncle Ling is getting stronger? Is he?" Qiao Ran narrowed his eyes. "I don't know." That Broken Skies sect disciple pursed his lips. He didn't dare to say anything. In the main hall, a few pearls hung high in the air, illuminating the entire hall. At this moment, there were 12 cultivators sitting cross-legged in the hall. There were male and female, middle-aged and elderly. The weakest among them was an insightful emptiness realm expert. It was just that the youngest one in the hall looked a little older than Ling Ji. These 12 cultivators sat on the two sides of the hall, all looking at Ling Ji, who was standing at the door. The hall was silent for a moment. Old Seven. The one who spoke again was still the same person who had just spoken. He sat at the front of the 6 cultivators on the left. His hair was white, and he wore a deep purple robe. "Since you have come, you must have something to say. Come and sit." Ling Ji raised his hands in a bow towards the crowd and slowly walked towards them. Old Seven. The old person spoke again. 10 years ago, Shifu died in the MO world. Broken Sky sect has been leaderless ever since. This is a great humiliation to the sect. We also swore in front of Shifu's memorial tablet that the one who killed that MO Shouja would be the next sect leader. So in these 10 years, I have temporarily taken over the position of sect leader and taken care of the daily affairs of the sect. He paused slightly when he said this, his sharp gaze looking around the remaining 11 Shouja in the hall. I also know that even though I am the eldest Shixiao, you are not satisfied with me. So in these 10 years, I have not interfered too much in the private affairs of the sect. The old person grimaced. These years, I feel lucky that Broken Sky sect has been able to maintain the reputation of the sect. One of the 11 Shouja snorted coldly. Whatever eldest Shixiao wants to say, just say it. As he spoke, he glanced at Ling Ji. Now that 7th Shidi has arrived, it is rare for us to gather together after we have cultivated under Shifu's tutelage. Now that we are gathered together, Shixiao can speak frankly. As long as it is beneficial to the sect, we are not people who would betray the sect. All right. The old person who was called eldest Shixiao nodded. The opportunity of the sect has reappeared. I still insist. While it is important to take revenge for Shifu, it is also important to choose a new sect leader. Zaya Shooting Gap. Calm, the opportunity of the sect has reappeared. Another middle-aged Shouja continued. Is eldest Shixiao referring to that little medical Xiao who knows formations in the apricot forest? That's right. The old person nodded slowly. My disciples once entered the apricot forest to train, although according to the rules, they were not allowed to bring anything out. However, he paused and looked around. This old man already knew that the apricot forest hid the secret of the ancient medical Xiao, so the old person flipped his hand, and a small green bead appeared in his palm. He threw the bead into the air. The bead emitted waves of light, and the light gathered on the wall deep inside the hall. The light flashed, and soon, a young man and woman standing side by side could be seen clearly. The woman was wearing a green robe, and her slender waist could not be held in one arm. Her back was straight, and her long black hair was tied up simply. The side of her face was elegant and refined, but there was still a hint of a young girl's childishness. Beside her, the black-robed man stood tall, and the scars on his face made his originally handsome appearance seem somewhat mysterious. This is, Aren't these two people Meng Qi and Ji Wujiang? They are moving. It's a formation. This Meng Qi is... She is looking at Feng Er's sword formation. There was a lot of discussion in the hall. However, Ling Ji did not join in. He still stood far away with his arms crossed in front of his chest, quietly watching the quick-witted green-robed woman on the light screen. It was Meng Qi. Ling Ji narrowed his eyes slightly. The light screen did not last long, and soon the hall became quiet again. After a moment of silence, someone asked, "So did she learn it before, or did she learn it directly from Phone or and the others?" This old man also wants to know the answer to this question. The old man said word by word in a deep voice. Obviously, Ji Wujiang and Meng Qi have learned more than what we have seen. The hall became silent once more. Since Old Seven is also here, the old man glanced at Ling Ji. "Now, let's vote on the bamboo slips." As he spoke, he flicked his sleeves and sent 13 bamboo slips to the 13 people, including himself. "Do you want to break the vow of the past and elect a new leader? Please express your opinions." Ling Ji reached out and picked up the bamboo slips. As long as they wrote their opinions on them, the side with more people would win. His gaze slowly swept across the people in the hall. They had already begun to move. Some quickly wrote down their opinions and threw the bamboo slips forward. The bamboo slips stood there quietly. No one would know what was written on them until the 13 slips were gathered. Some people whispered to the people around them and began to write on the bamboo slips. Soon, 12 bamboo slips floated in the center of the hall. Old Seven. The old man turned to look at Ling Ji. "You are the only one left." Ling Ji smiled. He exerted force in his hand, and the bamboo slips suddenly broke into two. "Old Seven, you?" The old man suddenly stood up and frowned at Ling Ji. "You are." Ling Ji stood with his hands behind his back and looked at the old man. "Choosing a new leader." The old man heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like this arrogant 7th junior martial brother was on his side this time. Before he could say anything, Ling Ji continued. "Since when did the Broken Void sect need to make decisions in such a wishy-washy way?" As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his finger. No one saw where his long sword came from. In the blink of an eye, the hall was filled with sword energy. Even though everyone present was an insightful emptiness realm expert, they were all powerful sword cultivators who could intimidate a region. At this moment, they could only feel their hair standing on end. Old Seven. The old man was the first to speak. He glared at Ling Ji. "What are you doing?" "Choosing a new leader." Ling Ji glanced at the old man with a faint smile and said indifferently, "The #1 sword cultivator sect in the world is choosing a new leader. Naturally, the strongest person will be chosen." At the same time, in the southeast corner of Mirror Moon City, in a private room of Wishing Lane Restaurant, a few young men and women were sitting around a table. "We actually came out." Sikong Xing still couldn't believe this was real. She stretched out her hand and pinched her face. She probably used too much strength in her hand, causing her to cry out in pain. Xing, the green-robed woman sitting beside her, was naturally Meng Qi. She lifted the teapot and poured a cup of tea for Sikong Xing. "We have already left the Starfall Sea." Phew. Sikong Xing heaved a sigh of relief and suddenly leaned on the table. "I still can't believe it. After all, in the end, it was really..." As she spoke, she turned her head to look behind her with lingering fear, as if someone was standing there. However, Meng Qi. Sikong Xing turned to look at her good friend. Ji Wujiang said that the person in the forest was also Senior Lin Yan. Is that true? Is it really Senior Lin Yan from the Apricot Forest? Hearing the two words Lin Yan, Lu Qing ran, who was sitting in the corner of the private room, trembled and shrank back. She timidly raised her head and quickly looked at Meng Qi and Sikong Xing. Even though they had already come out, she still couldn't help but shudder when she thought of what happened in the Starfall Sea. "It's because it was Senior Lin Yan that we could come out." Meng Qi looked at the table, her voice slightly hoarse. "Because Senior Lin Yan, she is always..." She didn't know how to describe it. After a long silence, she smiled slightly and said, "She has always been a medical cultivator." Chapter 131. Sikong Xing still wanted to ask, but Su Junmo hurriedly pulled her sleeve. Okay, let's not talk about this for now." He coughed a few times and quickly changed the topic. "Everyone should know about the Broken Space Sect. The news I received is that the Broken Space Sect is temporarily unable to spare any manpower to search for Meng Qi because the position of their sect leader has been vacant for 10 years. Once they elect a new sect leader, they will definitely use all their strength to deal with Meng Qi. This sect. At this point, Su Junmo frowned and muttered, "It has existed for many years. It's just that it has always kept a low profile. There are many sword cultivator sects in the 3,000 worlds, but no matter what, the Broken Space sect is always one of the top sword cultivator sections." He paused and looked at Pei Mufeng, who was sitting quietly on the side. When it comes to sword cultivator sects, Falling Star Pavilion obviously knows more. The talent of this young and promising sect leader of Falling Star Pavilion can be ranked in the top 3 of the current younger generation. 10 years ago, the Broken Space sect has no sect leader since the previous sect leader died at the hands of a demonic cultivator. However, they have 13 elders. Among these 13 elders, the weakest is a profound emptiness cultivator. Su Junmo continued. Everyone in the room couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when they heard this. Even cultivators from large sects like Chu Tianfeng and Qin Xiumo were shocked when they heard about the 13 profound emptiness cultivators. See, Luke, there hasn't been an ascended cultivator in the 3 realms for 10,000 years. Below the Mahayana realm, profound emptiness and profound emptiness cultivators are strong. As long as there is a profound emptiness cultivator in a sect, they can occupy a city in the 4 realms and establish their own territory. Broken Space City, is that strong? Chu Tianfeng frowned and asked in disbelief. But in the 3 realms, they are not that special. At this point, he frowned and didn't continue speaking. Everyone in the room understood what he meant. Broken Space City is really very low profile. The Western realms always said that their strongest sect is Mirror Moon Sky. Broken Sky City was indeed one of the 3 major sects, but in everyone's impression, it was probably similar to the Wind Alliance. 13 insightful emptiness realm elders. Even if the 4 families of the Wind Alliance joined forces, they would not be as powerful. Oh! Su Junmo nodded. He had his own sources of information, and it was basically accurate. He looked at Meng Qi, then quickly glanced at Ji Wujiong, who was standing lazily with his arms crossed in front of his chest. Previously, in the Starfall Sea, Ji Wujiong had arrogantly said that Broken Sky City was very weak, putting the cart before the horse, and ignorant of the Great Tao. She wondered what he would think after hearing this news. Ji Wujiong's eyes met with Su Junmo's, and a hint of mockery flashed across his dark eyes. He sneered, "Below the Grand Ascension stage, there's a limit to how strong you are. Do you have to be so flustered? Meng Qi, you'd better come with me." This group of people panics at the slightest sign of trouble. They don't seem very reliable. Although his words were sarcastic, the corners of his lips were always slightly raised. Even his eyes had a faint smile, and his tone was lazy with an indescribable satisfaction. Bah! Su Junmo couldn't help but despise Ji Wujiong in his heart, but he still felt a little strange. Since leaving the Starfall Sea, Ji Wujiong had such an expression. He seemed to be in a good mood. Meng Qi sat calmly at the table, as if he didn't hear Ji Wujiong's words at all. Then what about Mirror Moon Sky? Mirror Moon Sky. Su Junmo scratched his head. 7,000 years ago, Mirror Moon Sky was the #1 Dharma cultivation sect in the 3,000 worlds. Not only did the sect produce many geniuses, every time there was a conflict with the MO world, Mirror Moon Sky was always at the forefront. So many of their disciples were sacrificed. As far as I know, their young master almost died in a battle with a MO cultivator, causing his cultivation to be damaged and even unable to cultivate for the rest of his life. This wasn't the first time this had happened. That's why Mirror Moon Sky was able to maintain their reputation for thousands of years. Meng Qi nodded, seriously pondering this matter. She put one hand on the table, and the other hand gently clenched into a fist, holding a small Xian spirit stone in her palm. Although Xian spirit stones looked small, the 3,000 worlds divided spirit stones based on the amount of spirit energy contained in the spirit stones. The amount of spirit energy in this small Xian spirit stone was almost the same as the spirit energy in the entire spirit sea of a second-stage Mahayana cultivator. The Xian spirit stone gave off a faint light. Threads of spirit energy slowly seeped out of the stone and slowly seeped into Meng Qi's palm. If one looked closely, they would find that in the threads of spirit energy connecting Meng Qi's palm and the Xian spirit stone, other than the blue and white light of the spirit energy, there were also threads of blood thinner than hair. Meng Qi's palm was illuminated by the light of the spirit stone, and it was possible to faintly see the lines carved on her palm. Every time the spirit energy seeped into her palm, her right hand would tremble slightly. Because of the force, the veins on the back of her hand bulged. On her white skin, the blue veins were particularly prominent. But as she sat in front of the table, her expression was incomparably calm. When the young master of Mirror Moon Sky was mentioned, the room quieted. Everyone here was a Xiuzha. Most of them carried the name of geniuses and came from large sections. They knew too well the pain of a former genius falling into the dust and being unable to cultivate. Even if the sect still thought of him as a hero and treated him with respect. So what? If they were in his shoes, they would rather not be the young master. They didn't want the respect as long as they could continue to cultivate. So shouldn't we go to Mirror Moon Sky first? After a moment of silence, Chu Tianfeng took the initiative to ask. Not us. Meng Qi held the Xian spirit stone and stood up. It's me. Huh? Everyone was stunned and looked at Meng Qi in surprise. I will only take the spirit stones from the fallen star sea, Meng Qi said again. Meng Qi. Xikong Xing looked up at Meng Qi with a puzzled expression. What's wrong with you? Xing, Meng Qi said. We have already left the fallen star sea. Everyone has their own things to do. Don't you still want to find your mother? It's time to part ways. She bowed to everyone. Thank you for entering the fallen star sea for me. Meng Qi will definitely repay this kindness in the future if there is a chance. Meng Qi? Chu Tianfeng's frown deepened. He quickly interrupted Meng Qi. What are you talking about? We all know that if it weren't for you in the fallen star sea, we might not have been able to come out. But I don't understand. Why are we suddenly separating? Isn't our team very good? Chu Tianfeng's words touched everyone's heart. Even Li Che, Xue Qingxian, and even Su Zijuan looked at Meng Qi. They didn't spend much time together in the fallen star sea, but they fought side by side and went through fire and water together. This kind of friendship was very precious and couldn't be deceived. Everyone treated each other as good friends. Chu Tianfeng even felt that if he could always be like this with Meng Qi and everyone else, he wouldn't be lonely on the path of cultivation. How nice! Ji Wujiong suddenly chuckled and stepped forward to stand beside Meng Qi. You still don't understand? Understand what? Xikong Xing couldn't help but stare at Ji Wujiong. She wasn't so afraid of this black-robed man with a hideous wound on his face now. Although the other party was a poisonous snake, he wasn't the kind of person who would kill innocent people. Ji Wujiong put down his hands and looked around at everyone with a smile. Obviously, Meng Qi has thought it through. What's the point of hanging out with you? Of course, it's better to be my disciple. Bah! Xikong Xing reached out and gestured to her face. Bragging shameless. Meng Qi. Xue Jinwen looked at Meng Qi and asked seriously. You? She opened her mouth, but didn't know what to say. Ji Wujiong was right. Speaking of which, they entered the Starfall Sea to save Meng Qi. But along the way, if they sleepwalked Meng Qi, they might have been completely annihilated in the Starfall Sea. Meng Qi said earlier that she was very safe in the Starfall Sea, but no one believed her. Now it seemed that she was really safe at that time. If it weren't for them, she might have benefited more. Xue Jinwen and her brother looked at each other and saw deep concern in each other's eyes. She couldn't say what she wanted to say next. It wasn't just her. There were no idiots in the box. They all looked at Meng Qi with different expressions, but no one spoke. Meng Qi frowned and opened her mouth to say something, but in the end, she didn't say anything. In the end, she cupped her fists and bid farewell to everyone, then raised her chin at Ji Wujiong. Let's go. The door of Rosie Lane's box opened and then closed. The sound of footsteps gradually faded away, But the room was still quiet. F***CK. Chu Tianfeng was the first to jump to his feet. Why can't I stand Ji Wujiang's smug look? Sikong Xing pursed her lips. But he's an insightful emptiness realm expert. He can beat all of us with one hand. And Meng Qi left with him. I don't believe that Meng Qi is such a person. Could she have been threatened? Chu Tianfeng stared at the door with hatred, as if he wanted to burn 2 holes in it. I think it's strange, too. Sikong Xing frowned slightly and looked at Su Junmo. Meng Qi has always been cold to Ji Wujiang. Why did she suddenly leave with him? How would I know? Su Junmo said angrily. He was the one who was worried now. Meng Qi actually left with Ji Wujiang, and there was still no news from his lord. The demon lord token was about to reappear, and his lord's personal guards were still blocked by those guys in the 7th heaven domain, so we let Meng Qi leave with that guy. Chu Tianfeng jumped to the table and sat down, looking at Qin Xiuma in disbelief. You're not going to say anything? Qin Xiuma looked at him deeply, some doubts flashing in his eyes. Meng Qi definitely didn't despise them for not being strong enough. He wanted to know what happened after they fell unconscious in Jifan Forest that day. When everyone woke up that day, they were already at the edge of the Starfall Sea. There was an exit to the West World next to them, and Meng Qi was guarding them. According to Meng Qi, Lin Zhong was indeed the great senior of their medical cultivation, Lin Yin. She didn't want to make things difficult for the juniors, so she kindly sent them out. Qin Xiuma always felt that things weren't that simple. He turned to look at the door, then looked at the restless Chu Tianfeng, and said indifferently, Ji Wujiang is right. Huh. Chu Tianfeng was stunned, looking at Qin Xiuma in disbelief. If we follow Meng Qi now, we'll only be a burden to her. Qin Xiuma said, the Starfall Sea is the best example. He stood up. In the Starfall Sea, Meng Qi engraved formations on our life-bound magic weapons, or long swords. Now, cultivation can get half the result with twice the effort. I know that there are 3 cultivation mystic realms in the West world. Although it's dangerous, it can make cultivation twice the result with half the effort every time. Does anyone want to go with me? Qin Xiuma. Chu Tianfeng jumped up. Is this the time to cultivate? Broken Sky City is about to come out in full force to hunt down Meng Qi. This is the West World, the headquarters of those old guys from the Wind Alliance. They definitely won't let this go. Otherwise, Qin Xiuma's gaze suddenly shot coldly at Chu Tianfeng. Ji Wujiang is an insightful emptiness cultivator. What about you? Chu Tianfeng, who hadn't even been distracted, shut his mouth, unable to speak. Broken Sky City has 13 insightful emptiness elders. Even if we all follow Meng Qi, what's the use if we encounter them? He continued to ask. Chu Tianfeng, but he opened his mouth, but couldn't say anything else for a long time. Qin Xiuma was right. Not counting others, if he and Qin Xiuma joined forces, they probably couldn't block a single sword strike from an elder of Broken Sky City. What's the use of following Meng Qi? Chu Tianfeng gritted his teeth. Fine, I'll go with you to the secret realm. I want to go too. Sikong Xing stood up. I'll go too, Su Junmo said with a bitter smile. He didn't know what to do now. Before his lord gave a new order, it was always right to improve his own cultivation. Li Che raised his hand. I want to go too. Count me in, Sikong Zhan said. You're not going back to the demon realm? Sikong Xing's pretty eyes widened as she looked over. I'm not. Sikong Zhan quickly shook his head and said firmly. And me, Xue Jinwen said with a smile. Xue Qingxian beside her closed his eyes and said helplessly, I have to go home. He was the eldest son of the Xue family and the future heir of the Xue family. He couldn't do whatever he wanted like his third sister. Then count me in, Su Zijuan said. I have to return to the Starfall Sea. Pei Mufeng beside him said indifferently. Everyone nodded, expressing their understanding. Pei Mufeng had an agreement with the Medical Cultivators Conference Alliance. If the Medical Cultivators Conference was held in Starfall City, then he would enter the Starfall Sea for 10 years for the Medical Cultivators Conference Alliance to search for all kinds of spirit herbs and spirit flowers, as well as hunting strange beasts that could be used for medicine. Then what are we waiting for? Chu Tianfeng walked towards the door and urged Qin Xiuma. Let's go. No one asked Qin Xiuma, a southern Jie cultivator. How did he know about the western Jie's secret cultivation realm? Just like when everyone in the room left, they didn't even look at Lu Qingran, who was sitting in the corner of the room. They seemed to have completely forgotten about her existence. Whether it was Meng Qi, Ji Wujiong, Chu Tianfeng, Qin Xiuma, etc. When they left the room, they didn't even look at Lu Qingran out of the corner of their eyes. Lu Qingran sat there in a daze, watching the people in the room walk out in single file. Chu Tianfeng, Su Junmo, Xikong Xing. There were also Xue Qingxian and Li Che, who were from the medical cultivators sect. Clearly, not long ago, whether it was Li Che or Ji Wujiong, they all thought highly of her. But now, none of them even looked at her, as if she was just an insignificant insect. Also, Lu Qingran was in a daze, completely unable to understand. Why were these people gathered together? Was it because of Meng Qi, especially Xue Qingxian and Li Che? After the medical cultivators conference, shouldn't the two of them and Ji Wujiong fight whenever they see each other? But from the time they met in the Starfall Sea until now, although their relationship with Ji Wujiong couldn't be said to be very good, they could still be considered to be peaceful. Lu Qingran watched Su Zijuan, who was the last to leave the room, and even closed the door for her again. These people, if it was in the past, she would never have imagined that these people would actually stand together so peacefully. But now, they were like a team standing together. The atmosphere between them seemed to be very harmonious. And Ji Wujiong. Lu Qingran only had to think of Ji Wujiong's cold eyes, think of his pitch-black eyes, like a bottomless well. She couldn't help but shrink her body again. She was very clear about how scary this man was since they started in Cool Breeze Valley. He didn't have the slightest bit of pity. The life and death of others were like child's play in his eyes. Even if she seemed to be a little special to him, Lu Qingran never dared to act rashly in front of Ji Wujiong. She was really afraid of him. Now, even he was no longer that ruthless and indifferent man in front of Meng Qi. He could smile. Although he still had a poisonous tongue, he didn't seem so ruthless anymore. He could even bicker with a little girl like Xikong Xing. She really felt that this kind of Ji Wujiong was very unfamiliar to her. Why was it like this? Lu Qingran didn't understand. It was as if she was completely transparent, no different from a small flower by the roadside. All of their topics revolved around Junior Marshall's sister Meng Qi, regardless of whether she was here or not. Why was it like this? Lu Qingran didn't really understand. Was it just because of Junior Marshall's sister Meng Qi's outstanding performance at the Medical Cultivation Conference? Lu Qingran lowered her head to look at her hands. She and Junior Marshall's sister Meng Qi were clearly both Jindan cultivators. Why did she suddenly become so important? She at this time, with a bang, the door to the private room was pushed open. Lu Qingran hurriedly raised her head to look, a hint of joy uncontrollably appearing in her eyes. There were several shouja dressed in ginger yellow robes standing outside the door. Why is there only one person? Is the news wrong? Take her away first. Another person beside him looked around and said warily, "This is Wishing Lane. Do not linger." All right. Oh. Lu Qingran didn't have time to react at all. She felt her vision darken and an enormous bag fall on her head. Those people didn't touch her body at all, but she had no strength and her entire body softened. Before she lost consciousness, Lu Qingran seemed to hear the sounds of fighting. She could feel that she was being lifted up and uncomfortably carried on someone's shoulder. And then, she didn't know anything else. Outside Jingyue City, on the side of the Green Mountain, there was a cave about 2 people high. The entrance to the cave was not large, 2 people high, and could only allow 2 people to walk in side by side. The cave was about 300 zhang deep, and there was no light at all. This place was about 600 li away from Jingyue City. The rolling mountain range blocked people's footsteps. The leaves outside the cave blocked the sunlight, and the smell of decaying leaves entered the nose. Meng Qi sat cross-legged in the center of the cave, her face as pale as paper. Fine beads of sweat covered her white forehead, and even the tip of her nose was covered in sweat. Her palms were facing down, each holding a small Xian Ling stone. Ling energy was abundant, and strands of it flowed up her palms. It was unknown how much time had passed in the cave, but the black-clothed man lazily sitting at the entrance of the cave would get up and move around for a while every time the sun rose and set. Oh, about 7 days and 7 nights later, Meng Qi, who was sitting cross-legged in the cave, suddenly gave a muffled groan. She slowly opened her eyes. Her originally clear eyes were bloodshot. Ji Wujiang sighed softly and turned to look outside the cave. On the ground outside the cave, there was still a sliver of sunlight stubbornly shining through the leaves. But now it was pitch black. The sky above the forest was originally clear, but at this moment, there was a black cloud pressing down on it, right above the cave. Lightning flashed in the black cloud from time to time, making muffled rumbling sounds. Meng Qi exhaled softly, and her hands clenched even tighter. "Hey," Ji Wujiang said, "the tribulation cloud is here." "I know," Meng Qi said. Her voice was slightly hoarse, and not as clear as before. "Can you?" Meng Qi responded in a low voice. Ji Wujiang looked deeply at her. He opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. He stood up and walked out of the cave. Cultivation was originally going against the heavens. Therefore, from Jindan to Yuanying, cultivators had to experience heavenly tribulations, each stronger than the last. When they reached Mahayana, they would experience a tribulation for every small realm. What he didn't understand was that Meng Qi wasn't the kind of person who was obsessed with cultivation. So why did she suddenly? Before Ji Wujiang could finish this thought, a loud huacha sound came from behind him. At the same time, the area around him was illuminated as brightly as daytime. Ji Wujiang was startled and slowly turned around. He pressed his hand in the air, and the amethyst 8 trigrams disc appeared in the air, floating slowly by his side. Meng Qi was familiar with the 8 trigrams disc, so he could see the flashes of lightning in front of him. Occasionally, a thin figure could be seen between the flashes of lightning. Huacha! Huacha! The loud noises continued. The 8 trigrams disc shook its round body slowly, as if it was full of doubts. It flew around Ji Wujiang twice, and then stopped in front of him, swaying. "Don't ask me," Ji Wujiang said angrily. "I want to know too." As he said this, another loud huacha sound came, and a greenish-purple lightning struck down. The whole green mountain shook violently, as if it would be smashed into pieces by the lightning in the next moment. Seeing this, the amethyst 8 trigrams disc shook quickly, trying its best to rub against its master's face, as if it wanted Ji Wujiang to save Meng Qi in the cave. "It's useless." Ji Wujiang clenched his hands by his side, the blue veins bulging on the back of his hands, but he stood firmly in the same place, as if his feet were rooted to the ground. With great difficulty, he swallowed his saliva and looked at the thin figure in the lightning that was swaying back and forth, as if it would turn into smoke and disappear at any moment. This is her heavenly tribulation. If others help her, they will only cause her death. The amethyst 8 trigrams disc seemed to be startled and stopped in the air, swaying and falling down slowly. Ji Wujiang stared in the direction of Meng Qi, but he tapped his chest with his right hand and pulled out his black, narrow broadsword silently. He was always sharp-tongued, but he didn't know what to say at this moment. She asked for it. After a long while, Ji Wujiang squeezed out these few words. He looked up at the thick tribulation clouds in the sky, as if he were talking to himself, but also to the amethyst 8 trigrams disc. Cultivation is going against the natural order. Her talent in cultivation isn't as outstanding as her medical skills or magic formations. She should take it slow. But she didn't listen and insisted on. Ji Wujiang snorted softly. He didn't want to say more. Ji Wujiang held the narrow broadsword tightly with one hand and stared at Meng Qi without blinking. The lightning was still striking down, and the whole green mountain and the ground seemed to be shaking slightly. This wasn't like crossing the heavenly punishment from the Golden Core realm to the Yuanying realm. Some people would believe it if they said it was the spirit-severing realm advancing to the Dongshu realm. As Ji Wujiang was thinking, he glanced at the horizon out of the corner of his eye. It was the direction of Mirror Moon City. A few figures had flown up in the sky. Apart from them, there were also dozens of magic treasures in the sky, and they were all looking at this place from afar. Humph! He snorted coldly, and his narrow broadsword slashed at the sky. A black crack flashed in the sky, isolating space and time, so those spies couldn't sense what was happening here. Ji Wujiang grinned, revealing his white teeth, and winked at the amethyst 8 trigrams disc. I can't persuade her, but she must be in great pain right now. This kind of pain isn't something a little girl can endure. Fortunately, she's only advancing from golden core to nascent soul. He paused and said again, I hope this bone-piercing pain can make her give up on this path. It's fine if she slows down a bit, but there's no need to rush. The amethyst 8 trigrams disc swayed, but it was still floating beside Ji Wujiang. It seemed to have understood, and its body swayed back and forth a few times. I'm nervous? Why would I be nervous? All right, Ji Wujiang snorted. A little. I wanted to take a disciple, but I didn't want to take a dead disciple. The 8 trigrams disc swayed gently again. Humph, Ji Wujiang snorted coldly. If I don't agree, she won't go with me. It's just a temporary measure. Don't worry, I know a guy who has experienced this kind of pain before. After that experience, he said that even if he destroyed his whole cultivation base, he didn't want to try it a second time. Meng Qi will also give up. As Ji Wujiang spoke, he looked up at the sky again. Those life-bound magic treasures had already been withdrawn, and half of the dozen or so shadows that were originally standing in the sky had disappeared. The remaining few figures just stood in the sky far away and didn't intend to come over to investigate. Ho-cha-cha! Another loud sound rang out, and a huge lightning bolt cut through the sky, striking straight down and landing on Meng Qi's head. In the cave, the incomparably tiny figure swayed slightly under the lightning, as if she couldn't hold on any longer. Ho-cha-cha! Ho-cha-cha! Without giving her a chance to catch her breath, one lightning bolt after another struck down from the sky. Ji Wujiang watched with a bit of trepidation. The tiny figure swayed in the lightning, as if she would fall down at any time. He clenched his narrow saber. As long as Meng Qi fell down, he would rush in to save her at any time. Ho-cha-cha! However, no matter how earth-shattering the lightning bolt was, and no matter how much the thin figure swayed, she still sat cross-legged on the ground and never fell down. Finally, the last lightning bolt struck down heavily, and the green mountain shook violently. But soon, everything returned to tranquility. Meng Qi, Ji Wujiang quickly jumped up and rushed into the cave. The green-robed girl looked up at him. Her lips were stained with blood, and her face was as white as paper. But she still curved her lips and smiled at him. Nascent soul. Meng Qi paused and said in a hoarse voice, Thank you. As soon as she finished speaking, her tottering body fell to the side and hit the ground with a bang. Chapter 132. You're awake? In her hazy state, Meng Qi heard a deep male voice ringing in her mind. The voice seemed to be very far away, but also very close to her. She only felt that her head was very heavy, and there was no place on her body that didn't hurt, especially her meridians and spirit sea, which seemed to have been completely shattered and then pieced back together. Even her limbs, bones, and muscles all over her body felt as if they had been crushed by a huge rock, as if countless small needles were pricking her. Ugh! Meng Qi groaned, and her eyelashes trembled a few times before she slowly opened her eyes. What entered her eyes was a dark gray stone wall. The surroundings were gloomy, and 2 fist-sized pearls floated in the air, emitting a soft light. Sharp pearls? Meng Qi's eyes widened. Only now did she smell that the air was filled with the scent of the sea. It was vigorous and vast, and she felt like she was in the middle of the sea. The scent of the shark pearls was inhaled into her body, and like seawater, It caressed every inch of her meridians and flesh, alleviating the pain in her body slightly. Meng Qi's mind also became much clearer. She slowly exhaled and hurriedly used her divine sense to explore her spirit sea. Before she fainted, she had successfully passed the tribulation, and her spirit sea was now about 3 times larger than when she was in the Jinan stage. Her spirit sea was overflowing with spirit energy, and her Niden floated silently in the air. Threads of spirit energy slowly seeped out of the Niden and slowly poured into her spirit sea. The 5 spirit cauldron floated in the air, and beside it was the bamboo scroll that Lin Yan had given her. The bamboo scroll seemed to have become more lustrous than before and emitted a faint light. When a cultivator's realm increased, it would also have some effect on their natal magic treasures. At this time, the 5 spirit cauldron looked more refined than before, and even the patterns on the cauldron had become more complicated. Meng Qi's divine sense explored the 5 spirit cauldron and knew that if she used it to refine medicine in the future, the time it would take to refine medicine would be reduced by 10%, and the medicine's efficacy would also be increased by 10%. The threads of spirit energy on the Niden were now divided into 2 threads. One entered the 5 spirit cauldron, and after being refined in the 5 spirit cauldron, it slowly poured into her spirit sea. The other part was probing towards the small bamboo scroll. The spirit chi wrapped the bamboo slip in the middle, becoming thicker and thicker. In the end, it seemed to have turned into a cocoon of light. The bamboo slip was completely surrounded by the spirit chi cocoon. Meng Qi was a little surprised. She hurriedly observed the bamboo slip carefully. The cocoon of spiritual aura was getting thicker and bigger. When it was almost larger than the 5 spirits cauldron, a small opening suddenly appeared at the top of the light cocoon. Spiritual chi wrapped around the bamboo slips and flew out. The light cocoon instantly turned into countless silvery white threads that entered the 5 spirits cauldron. Meng Qi's eyes widened slightly. She could clearly sense that this spiritual energy didn't fall into her spirit sea together with the other spiritual energy, but remained in the 5 spirits cauldron. The 5 spirits cauldron was her natal magic treasure. It was connected to her by a strand of divine sense, which allowed her to sense every minute change in the 5 spirits cauldron. Now, Meng Qi realized that the spirit chi that flowed from the bamboo slip to the 5 spirit cauldron did not return to the spirit sea. Instead, it was deposited in the 5 spirit cauldron and slowly absorbed by the small cauldron. She stilled. Natal magic treasures needed to advance, but the method of advancement was different from Xiozhi's cultivation. Natal magic treasures didn't need spiritual energy. Even if they stayed in a Xiozhi's spirit sea all year round, they would only be nourished by spiritual energy. Over the years, their minds would become more connected to the Xiozhi, and there would be a clear difference from normal magic treasures. Then why did the 5 spirits cauldron leave this spiritual energy behind? Meng Qi sat dazedly where she was, her consciousness still paying attention to the flow of spiritual energy in the 5 spirits cauldron. After being tempered by the bamboo slip, the ball of spiritual energy looked even more condensed, as though it was tangible. At this time, it was slowly spinning in the belly of the 5 spirits cauldron. Then the little ball of spiritual energy became thinner and thinner, and was about to completely disappear into the small cauldron. Just at this time, another ball of pure white spiritual energy flew into the 5 spirits cauldron. Meng Qi's consciousness instinctively turned towards the bamboo slip. As expected, a new cocoon of spiritual energy started to wrap around it. Endless growth. This was something that Meng Qi had never experienced before. She reflexively raised her head to look at the black-robed youth sitting at the side. Ji Wujiong's arms were crossed in front of his chest as he lazily leaned against the stone wall of the cave. The mermaid pearl floated in the air, and its lustrous light shone on his handsome features. Even the corners of his lips, which had always been vicious, looked gentler. The amethyst 8 trigrams disc floated next to him, flashing. A hint of disappointment that even she didn't notice appeared in Meng Qi's eyes. She moved her gaze away, steadied her mind, and slowly exhaled. So it was Ji Wujiang. No, she stilled slightly, a hint of confusion flashing through her eyes before they quickly became clear again. How long have I been unconscious? Meng Qi took back the thread of consciousness that had entered her spirit sea and rubbed her head. When she raised her hand, the pain of being pierced by thousands of needles came again, even stronger than before. Meng Qi's brow furrowed, and she suppressed a grunt. But her face turned pale in an instant, and fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. 3 days. Ji Wujiang was still lazily leaning against the stone wall. He looked at Meng Qi's small face that was as pale as paper, and the corners of his lips rose slightly. You're already pretty good, waking up in 3 days. I thought that you would be unconscious for 10 days to half a month. Maybe your path would collapse, and you would never wake up again. As he spoke, he carelessly waved his hand. The amethyst 8 trigrams disc suddenly flew over and quickly spun around Meng Qi a few times. Then with a whoosh, it leapt onto her face, rubbed against her face, and then swayed and disappeared. Meng Qi did not comment, and tilted her head slightly. She now understood a bit of what Ji Wujiang had said before, that even Xiuzhi could not bear the terrifying pain that even Xiuzhi could not bear. Just forcefully drawing the Ling energy of the Ling stone into the body and then using it for one's own use. Every moment, it was like they were dismembering themselves. Not to mention that terrifying, mighty, and tyrannical heavenly tribulation, which was obviously more terrifying than the heavenly tribulation that normal Xiuzhi underwent from Jinan to Yuanying. If they were not careful, they could die and their Tao would disappear. Meng Qi gently exhaled again. Even now, the pain in her body did not lessen at all. She could only breathe carefully. What? Ji Wujiang stared at her expressionless face and raised his brows. You really plan to continue cultivating using this method? He paused and then said, This is only from Jinan to Yuanying, and it is already so painful. From Yuanying to spirit severing, it is even more terrifying. Not to mention the heavenly tribulation later. Can you endure it? Meng Qi tilted her head slightly again and looked at Ji Wujiang's injured face. After leaving the Starfall Sea, the scars on his face became even more obvious. Previously, Ji Wujiang only had 3 narrow wounds on his face. However, the wounds were relatively long, stretching from his eyebrows to his ears. The 3 scars took up almost half of his face on the left side. Adding on the fact that they were black in color, they looked slightly sinister. Now, the wounds on Ji Wujiang's face were wider than before. The black color had already started to seep into the skin around the wounds. The wounds had even split open slightly, and the black flesh inside could be seen. From time to time, black energy would seep out of the wounds, making them look even more sinister and terrifying. The right side of Ji Wujiang's face was still intact. No matter where he was in the 3 realms, he would be a top handsome man. However, people were unwilling to even look at the left side of his face. It was not entirely because of the ugliness caused by the wounds, but because there was a demonic and terrifying feeling to it. Ji Wujiang did not care at all, and openly displayed the wounds on his face. However, a faint smile slowly appeared in his eyes, and the corners of his lips rose slightly, as if he was mocking himself, and also as if he was mocking something. It made the wounds look even stranger. Ji Wujiang suddenly sneered, and reached out to touch his left face. You guessed it? He suddenly asked. Meng Qi retracted her gaze, and answered faintly, I'm a medical cultivator. She had said this when she was still enemies with Ji Wujiang in the grand competition, and the two of them did not get along well. Now only a few months had passed, and for nascent soul cultivators, it was only a short moment in their long lives. However, it felt like time had passed and the world had changed. Ji Wujiang touched the wounds on his face again. I don't mind. Before he could finish speaking, Meng Qi turned her head and glanced at him. When she first met Ji Wujiang, he was clearly wearing a black veil. So how could that be called not speaking? Cough, cough. The green-robed woman in front of him clearly did not say anything, but Ji Wujiang still coughed a few times uncomfortably. Well, what I mean is, we men don't care so much about our appearance. As long as we're strong enough. Who cares if you're beautiful or ugly? Women are different after all. What's the difference? Meng Qi tilted her head slightly and looked at Ji Wujiang in confusion. Isn't it the same cultivation, where the strong are respected? Ji Wujiang was a little speechless, which was rare. He stared at Meng Qi, and after a long while, he snorted and looked at Meng Qi from the corner of his eyes. There are countless beauties in the demon realm, enchanting, pure, hot, and passionate. Demon cultivators are famous in the three realms, and there are all kinds of beauties. Look at Xikong Xing. She's a top beauty in the three realms, but in the demon realm, she's not ranked. Do you really not care at all? Meng Qi thought about it seriously. The stars are quite beautiful. Ji Wujiang. After Meng Qi finished speaking, she reached out to support herself against the wall of the cave and slowly stood up. She lowered her head and looked at her palm. Thin red lines outlined an incomparably complicated and intricate magic array. Meng Qi slowly clenched her fists and looked at Ji Wujiang again. She thought about it again and said, I can try to treat this injury. After Meng Qi finished speaking, she looked out of the cave. When she first came, the cave was hidden in the forest, and it was extremely quiet. Now, the trees outside the cave seemed to have encountered a terrifying catastrophe that was enough to exterminate a clan. Within a mile of the cave, all the trees had turned to ashes. Ji Wujiang also stood up. He slowly walked to Meng Qi's side and looked out of the cave with her. Seeing this, he sneered. Mirror Moon Heaven is recognized as the #1 Dharma cultivator sect in the three realms, but the heavenly tribulation from the Golden Core to the nascent Soul Realm actually made the elders of the sect personally come out to investigate. It's really strange, timid, and cautious. Meng Qi replied with a She took a deep breath and took out a Xian spirit stone from the brocade bag beside her. The Xian spirit stone stuck to the array in her palm, and the originally dark red lines suddenly turned bright red, as if they were fresh blood. Those blood-like red lines slowly extended toward the Xian spirit stone and wrapped around it. Threads of spirit qi flowed along the red lines from the Xian spirit stone to Meng Qi's palm. Her face suddenly changed color, and large beads of sweat rolled down her forehead. Her face also became extremely pale. 3 thin black lines appeared on Meng Qi's originally smooth skin on the left side of her face. Under her white and delicate skin, the black lines became more and more obvious. Actually, just this alone was not that scary. But if one looked closely at her cheeks, they would see something surging and rolling under the thin layer of skin, as if it would burst out of her skin at any time. Her appearance was elegant, and her cheeks were much fairer than Ji Wujiang's. Looking at it like this, she did indeed look quite ferocious. Hey! Ji Wujiang's expression changed, and he grabbed Meng Qi's wrist. Do you want to die? After he finished speaking, he waved his hand and threw away the Xian spirit stone in Meng Qi's hand. You just went through the heavenly tribulation, and your spirit sea is not stable. Are you crazy? Meng Qi did not speak. Her beautiful eyes moved, and her gaze swept across Ji Wujiang's face coldly. Why are you staring at me? Ji Wujiang snorted coldly. Those idiots don't understand, but I know what you want to do. He did not dare to look at Meng Qi's eyes. Instead, he turned to look outside the cave and snorted again before continuing. The battle of the demon lords is indeed dangerous. After Ji Wujiang said this, he quickly glanced at Meng Qi and said, Okay. As far as I know, every time the demon lord decree is issued, the demon realm will be covered in blood for 3 months. Countless great demon lords will die, and some of the weaker clans might be exterminated if they stand on the wrong side. But he is the demon lord, and he won last time. How can he lose when he fights again 100 years later? Meng Qi. Ji Wujiang looked at Meng Qi. I can understand your feelings, but are you looking down on the demon lord? Or are you looking down on perfected Lord White Tiger? Or... His eyes flashed, and he touched his chin with interest. Is there something I don't know? After all, with your blind worship of Yin Qing Yin, you shouldn't be worried about him. Meng Qi also snorted, which was rare. She bent over and picked up the Xian spirit stone that Ji Wujiang threw away. She did not explain this question. Let me guess. We don't know what happened after you met Lin Yin in the Starfall Sea, but you suddenly changed. You hurriedly got rid of those people who were dragging you down, and suddenly didn't insist on taking Yun Qing Yin as your master. You knew that your talent wasn't enough, and you were even willing to take me as your master. You would rather destroy your appearance and endure the pain to improve your cultivation. Ranwina. Net Ji Wujiang was not angry. Now, only he and Meng Qi were here. His eyes flashed. At that time, he only vaguely knew what Lin Yin said to Meng Qi. After all, he was also an insightful emptiness realm cultivator. Lin Yin was an ancient almighty. Even if his cultivation was later damaged and fell back to the insightful emptiness realm, he would never improve again. However, he was the last profound realm great doctor from 10,000 years ago. In the end, Ji Wujiang could not compare to him. But he was still much better than Xikong Xing and the others. Those people had no idea that so many things had happened later. They probably only thought that they had fainted and then were sent out of the Starfall Sea by Lin Yin. Xikong Xing and the others did not even know what the forest was used for. Is there some ancient secret or inheritance? Ji Wujiang frowned slightly. He crossed his arms in front of his chest, and the slender fingers of his left hand gently tapped on his arm. Meng Qi curled her lips, still not answering this question. She thought for a moment, then walked out of the cave. Let's go. It's fine if you don't say it. I'll find out sooner or later. Ji Wujiang's steps were light. But don't be too anxious. After all, you're not a demonic cultivator. It's not a good idea to continue like this. I'm afraid that your Dao foundation will be greatly damaged before you reach the soul-splitting stage. It's very easy to die under the heavenly tribulation when you're in the soul-splitting stage. I know, Meng Qi said. Demonic cultivators rely on star arrays and the power of the stars to cultivate. Their cultivation speed is faster than cultivators and demonic cultivators. Demonic cultivators are born with physiques that can cross the three realms. They can cultivate from the outside to the inside. We cultivators from the three realms have the strongest learning ability. Many cultivators from the three realms can create cultivation techniques, dharma treasures, pills, and so on. It's good that you know. Ji Wujiang walked down the mountain side by side with her. Actually, if you're not in a hurry and follow me for 100 years and let me teach you well, your future will be limitless. In my opinion, Dao companions are nothing. Only cultivation is the right path to the great Dao. You might as well put it down. Anyway, before he could finish speaking, Meng Qi's gaze swept over. Her expression was not very cold, but Ji Wujiang immediately shut his mouth. During their first encounter in the barrier competition, he had already deeply experienced how persistent Meng Qi was towards Yun Qingyan. Write down Master's reminder. Meng Qi's tone was indifferent. Her eyelids drooped slightly, and her long eyelashes trembled slightly. She focused on walking forward. Ji Wujiang. He glanced sideways at Meng Qi. Why did he not feel the slightest bit happy when Meng Qi addressed him as Master, without any hint of reluctance in her tone? Cough, cough, cough. Ji Wujiang cleared his throat. Since you've already become my disciple and the successor of the Ji family, I should tell you some things about me. Oh, Meng Qi responded again. Master, please speak. Where are we going now? Ji Wujiang did not talk about his own matters first. Instead, he asked, are we returning to Mirror Moon City? Yes. Meng Qi nodded. I want to try and see if I can cure the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven. Chapter 133. Mirror Moon Heaven was the largest Dharma cultivation sect in the 3,000 worlds, and Mirror Moon City was the second largest city in West Jia. The entire city was on the east side of West Jia. The closest city to Mirror Moon City was Shui City of the Wind Alliance's Shui family. It was currently afternoon, and the streets of Mirror Moon City were bustling with people. The shops on both sides were orderly. Whether they were residents of the city or cultivators from other places, they all had relaxed and happy smiles on their faces. After all, under the light of the #1 Dharma cultivation sect in the 3,000 worlds. The people here lived prosperous and peaceful lives. This was Ming Qi's second time in Mirror Moon City. Mirror Moon City had no city walls or even a city gate. The entire city just lay there magnanimously, showing the presence of the #1 Dharma cultivation sect. Ji Wujiang walked beside Ming Qi. His lips curled up slightly as he laughed softly. They were relaxed on the surface, but tense on the inside. When you were undergoing the tribulation earlier, they should have sensed it. The elders of the sect have already moved out. Ming Qi grunted and nodded. Right, do you know? As Ji Wujiang spoke, he turned to look at Ming Qi. His gaze flashed slightly and landed on the other side profile. 3 thin black marks could already be seen on Ming Qi's white cheeks, running from her ears to her smooth forehead. The black marks had not split open yet, and were not as terrifying as Ji Wujiang's. However, Ming Qi's skin was whiter than his, and she was a girl. The damage to her appearance should be more serious than Ji Wujiang's. But Ji Wujiang looked at Ming Qi's calm and clear eyes, and a strange feeling flashed through his heart. Although cultivators pursued the great Tao and did not care so much about appearance. However, she was a female cultivator after all. TSK. What do you want to say? He did not answer for a long time. Ming Qi waited for a long time, so she turned to him and asked, Do I know something? Oh. Ji Wujiang suddenly came back to his senses and continued. You know about the Outland, right? Ming Qi was moved, but he still nodded obediently. Other than the Heavens Beyond City and the floating island, there are many other ownerless blessed lands around the Heavens Beyond for cultivators to explore. Ji Wujiang said, Some time ago, there was a strange sign in a blessed enclave. The owner of the Sky Beyond Sky auctioned the mountain entry token on the Sky Auction Island. At this point, he paused for a moment before continuing. The mountain entry tokens are the proof that one can participate in the exploration of these grotto heavens and blessed lands. Every time, they can be auctioned off at a sky-high price. Each entry token can bring 5 people into the mountains. I heard that the 7th mountain of the realm, beyond heaven, is up for auction. Ming Qi responded in a low voice. Not only was she aware of this, but she was also present at the Heaven-class auction house when the 7th mountain's entry token was auctioned off. At that time, she went to bid for Jiyu. In the end, not only did she win the bid for Jiyu, but she also spent a few hundred rank 8 spirit stones to bid for a jade slip that was taken from the fallen star sea. It was a pity that she did not know what kind of jade slip it was. Thinking about what happened at that time, Ming Qi could not help but smile. At that time, she was really quite poor. In order to save up rank 9 spirit stones, she and Chu Tianfeng racked their brains to hunt demons and then went to the Cultivator Alliance to exchange for spirit stones. In the end, they could only get a few rank 9 spirit stones. But now that she thought about it, she was quite happy. Ming Qi's eyelids drooped slightly. Her long eyelashes fluttered a few times, hiding the smile in her eyes. Ji Wujiang's eyes were sharp, so he still saw it. He did not ask. Ming Qi called him master. How could he not see that she was not willing to do so? It was fine. Ji Wujiang was very optimistic. He did not mention the 7th mountain of the sky beyond heaven's blessed enclave because he was bored. He had his own plans. There are 81 green mountains outside Sky Beyond Heaven City. Ji Wujiang continued. Since the appearance of the first blessed enclave, it has been thousands of years. Until now, only 9 mountains have not been explored. He seemed to be very familiar with Sky Beyond Heaven. As soon as he spoke, he could not stop talking. Although the blessed enclave appears randomly, no one knows what they will gain before entering it. But now it is publicly acknowledged that the higher the ranking of the mountain, the better the blessed enclave. Ming Qi nodded again. The 7th mountain this time is already the highest ranking mountain among the top 10, excluding the first mountain. I heard that a total of 16 mountain entry tokens were auctioned that day. In addition, the owner of Sky Beyond Heaven usually keeps one for himself. The Mirror Moon Sky, the Broken Space Sect, and the Wind Alliance in the Western Kingdom all have a mountain entry token. Ji Wujiang continued. Ming Qi finally turned her head and looked seriously at Ji Wujiong. Ji Wujiong grinned at her and raised his eyebrows proudly. Are you wondering why I know so much? He paused and said, It's a long story. When I'm free, I'll tell you slowly. Sky beyond heaven is complicated. 7 floating islands. Humph. Ji Wujiong snorted and said, The owner of that place definitely has a big plan. I'm afraid that just some spirit stone business won't satisfy him. Humph. The cultivators of the 3,000 worlds can compete with the demon world and the devil world for so many years. They are indeed full of talents. Meng Qi's heart moved slightly. The owner of Sky Beyond Heaven, isn't that? Ji Wujiong continued. The blessed enclaves of Sky Beyond Heaven sound nice. The blessed enclaves are rich in spirit energy and countless treasures. There might even be ancient relics. Moreover, it's the best place for cultivators to cultivate. In addition, some spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs that can no longer be cultivated can also be cultivated in the blessed enclaves. It can be said that with a blessed enclave, a cultivator is equivalent to a sect. If a cultivator can have a blessed enclave of the 7th mountain that was auctioned off with 16 mountain entry tokens, he'll be willing to join the 4 realms' great sects in 100 years. The 10 great sects might not be able to, but they're definitely not to be underestimated. So the blessed enclaves can not only be used for people to find treasures, but they can also be owned by cultivators? Meng Qi heard this for the first time. Yes. Ji Wujiong nodded. But not all blessed enclaves can be owned by cultivators. Some blessed enclaves can be found with the cave master's imprint magic treasure. After the imprint magic treasure recognizes the person as its master, that person can own the blessed enclave and enter it freely, becoming the new master of the place. Among the 4 realms' 10 great sects, 6 of them have blessed enclaves in the outer sky. Without exception, they've all developed greatly since then. Even if they weren't among the 10 great sects in the past, they quickly became one of them. When Ji Wujiong talked about these stories, he didn't lose to Su Junmo. There was no one else here, so he restrained his vicious tongue when talking to Meng Qi. Meng Qi listened with great interest and found it quite interesting. You just said that among the 81 mountains in the outer sky, there are less than 10 blessed enclaves that haven't appeared yet, and there are only 6 sects with blessed enclaves? Ji Wujiong nodded with satisfaction and lowered his voice. This is the biggest secret of the outer sky. Meng Qi couldn't help but pout. She was almost certain that Yun Qingyan was the master of the outer sky. Qingyan's Zhenjun was unparalleled in power, and even Ji Wujiong was far from him. If it was really the biggest secret of the outer sky, how could he have heard it? Believe me, Ji Wujiong wasn't angry. He snorted softly. The 2 of them had already returned to Mirror Moon Sky City. This was the 2nd largest city in the Western Realms. The 2 of them were already sitting in an independent courtyard in Auspicious Lane. Under the crabapple tree, the limestone chairs were polished clean and simple. The aroma of tea on the stone table filled the air. Meng Qi held the teapot and poured a cup of tea for the 2 of them. Ji Wujiong's voice was still low and serious. Like this time, 6 or 7 of the 16 tokens to enter the mountain are in the hands of the heavenly demon royal family or aristocrats. His tone was serious, and he paused after every word. In the outer sky, besides the cultivators from the 3 realms, many demon cultivators can also enter. It's just that for many years, the demon cultivators don't like to trade. Other than occasionally participating in the heaven or earth auctions, they rarely go there. Meng Qi was speechless. She looked up at Ji Wujiong and he looked back at her quietly. Meng Qi pursed her lips slightly and asked, and then? Ji Wujiong snorted softly and opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something. However, when he saw Meng Qi's calm expression, he didn't say anything in the end. He looked up at the sky slightly and narrowed his eyes in silence for a moment. Then he said leisurely, For 10,000 years, no one in the 3 realms has ascended to the Tao. Mahayana cultivators are becoming fewer and fewer. The cultivators of the 3 realms are declining, but the internal strife is getting more and more intense. The cultivators began to fight for power like kings. They were addicted to the wealth and power in front of them and couldn't extricate themselves. The great path is boundless, but everyone seems to be blindfolded. They can't see it. After he finished speaking, he looked at Meng-Chi. The green-robed woman was holding her chin with one hand and listening to him carefully. Ji Wujiang became familiar with her in the apricot forest barrier. He was tempted to take her in as a disciple. Meng-Chi's outstanding talent was one reason, but the key was her temperament. He picked up the teacup and took another sip of tea. Other than that, there were some other reasons. Ji Wujiang didn't continue speaking. He sat opposite Meng-Chi and fell silent. And then, Meng-Chi waited for a while and asked obediently. Ji Wujiang couldn't help but raise his eyebrows and smile. When Meng-Chi was obedient and sensible, she was really the most suitable person to chat with. She didn't talk much, but she would answer at the right time so that the conversation wouldn't become awkward. The great path was really boundless. Sometimes he also wished that he could have such a person by his side. I digress. Let's continue talking about the blessed enclave in the Outland. Ji Wujiang put down the teacup and collected his thoughts. Where were we just now? For the blessed enclave to recognize a new owner, it needs to be recognized by the imprint token. The spiritual energy inside is rich and suitable for cultivation. It can also cultivate all kinds of spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs, Meng-Chi said. She was quite interested in this. One had to know that the 3,000 worlds had been cultivating for a long time. It was said that in ancient times, there were people who could refine spatial artifacts that could be carried around and grow spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Unfortunately, it had been lost 10,000 years ago. Some spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs required very strict conditions to grow. Rich spiritual energy was only one of them. For example, the phoenix fruit required the heavenly demon phoenix to accompany it. Another example was extremely cold grass like the jackdaw grass. It needed to grow in an environment of ice and snow, so it could only be found in the Northland. The legendary spatial artifacts that could cultivate spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs could provide these spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs with abundant spiritual energy. They could also use arrays to change the growing environment of the spiritual flowers and spiritual herbs. Meng-Chi had seen it in a book before. She thought that the blessed enclave itself was rich in spiritual energy, so it should have the same magical effects as these spatial artifacts. You want it? Ji Wujiang glanced at Meng-Chi and asked with a smile. Good stuff, everyone wants it. Meng-Chi said, but I heard that if you want to explore outside Heaven's Beyond City, you have to be at least at the spirit severing stage. Only when you've reached the spirit severing stage can you enter the blessed enclave. Oh! Ji Wujiang nodded. That's true, but it's not like there's no other way. If you can reach the perfected nascent soul stage before the 7th mountain officially opens, I'll take you to the blessed enclave. Really? Meng-Chi's eyes lit up. Of course. Ji Wujiang smiled again. But whether you can be recognized and become the new owner of the blessed enclave depends on your own ability. You're right. Everyone wants good things. I'm also quite interested. Thank you, Master. Meng-Chi stood up and bowed respectfully to Ji Wujiang. Humph. Ji Wujiang snorted and looked her up and down. You're suddenly so obedient. You must be up to something. Meng-Chi smiled sweetly and her eyebrows relaxed. Humph, humph, humph. Ji Wujiang looked her up and down, and his gaze finally fell on her smiling eyes. He was not blind. Being able to leave the Starfall Sea alive and not being left behind in the forest by Lin Yin was clearly something to be happy about. But Meng-Chi seemed to have become unhappy. She still smiled at her group of friends, but her smile was very faint. She might not even notice it herself, but her eyebrows would always subconsciously frown. It was obvious that she had a lot on her mind. Although Ji Wujiang had not been with her for a long time, they had fought side by side and could be said to have gone through life and death together. He was very clear about this girl's stubbornness. If Meng-Chi did not want to say something, no one could force her to say it. If she did not want to do something, even death would not be able to threaten her. In the end, he did not expect that Meng-Chi would take the initiative to come to him and be willing to become his disciple. Was Ji Wujiang happy? Of course he was, but he was more surprised and curious. Now, looking at Meng Qi's obviously happy appearance, he knew that she must have some plan and that the Blessed Enclave could help her. Ji Wujiang took out a jade slip from his storage bag and handed it over. Being my disciple is not as simple as calling me master. Let's get to work. Meng Qi took the jade slip. On the back of the jade slip, there was a Ji character written in bold strokes. It was somewhat similar to the one she saw in the barrier of the grand competition. It should be something from the Ji family. She nodded and sent a wisp of spiritual aura into the jade slip. It recorded some simple formations and some history of the Ji family. Meng Qi read 10 lines at a glance and finished reading the jade slip. It turned out that the Ji family's history was so long that it could be traced back to the ancient times tens of thousands of years ago. Meng Qi's heart skipped a beat. She remembered that Yun Qingyan once told her that the master of a demon residence in the demon realm was also surnamed Ji, and the other party had a good relationship with the demon realm. On the contrary, in the Trichiliocosm, Meng Qi had never heard anyone mention the famous Ji family. She did not ask further and put away the jade slip. What are your plans next? Ji Wujiang asked again. Go to Moon Mirror Heaven? Meng Qi shook her head and said honestly, I was born in the cool breeze valley. I don't belong to any sect now. I just reached the nascent soul realm, and even my medical skills are only 4th grade. It's useless to go to Moon Mirror Heaven now. That's not necessarily true. Ji Wujiang saw it more clearly than her. After the apricot forest incident, you're quite famous in the Trichiliocosm. If you go to Moon Mirror Heaven with this face, they might not dare to chase you out. Meng Qi shook her head again. That Moon Mirror Heaven's young master's inner core is injured. Even if I can go now, I'm not sure I can cure him. Speaking of medical skills, Ji Wujiang was not completely ignorant. He was quite good at using poison and detoxifying, but he was not a medical cultivator. Ji Wujiang's slender fingers tapped rhythmically on the bluestone table a few times. At that time, a new boundary crack appeared between the Trichiliocosm and the demon realm. The crack was very small, and it was not easy to pass through. It was impossible for those above the insightful void realm to pass through. Meng Qi nodded. Ji Wujiang glanced at her and said, the master of the demon residence where the crack was located personally sent a small team of demonic cultivators into the Trichiliocosm. As a result, they were discovered, and then they fought fiercely at the boundary crack for 3 days and 3 nights. The cultivator who discovered them seriously injured the leader of the demonic cultivators and forcefully dragged this small team of demonic cultivators to the crack. Otherwise, TSK, do you know? There's a type of demonic cultivator that specializes in poison. They grew up soaking in poisonous swamps filled with poisonous insects and plants. Their bodies are full of poison. Ordinary people will immediately die if they get close to them, let alone touch them. So there's such a poison demonic cultivator in that team? Meng Qi asked. She only knew about this matter from Li Che in the Starfall Sea. But clearly, whether it was Li Che or the Shui family, they didn't know as much as Ji Wujiang. At least, they didn't know that there was a poison demonic cultivator in this team of demonic cultivators. Those who were called poison demonic cultivators by Meng Qi were, as Ji Wujiang said, a special kind of cultivator in the demon realm. Strictly speaking, they were not a kind of cultivator school. Poison demonic cultivators could be spell cultivators, or sword cultivators, or even medical cultivators or formation cultivators. What was special about them was that they grew up with poisonous insects and plants, so even their Ling energy was poisonous. If a poison demonic cultivator was a spell cultivator, then when they cast spells, poison energy would fill the sky. If they were sword cultivators, then their life bond longsword would be naturally poisonous. If a powerful poison demonic sword cultivator attacked, if the sword could wound the other, it would usually end with blood. When a Shouja reached a high level, it was hard for them to be killed by poison. But it was not certain for those below Jindan. It was recorded in the books of the 3,000 worlds that in the 2 great battles with the MO had brought poison demonic cultivators who happened to be sword cultivators. The shadows of their life bond longsword spread and swept the battlefield with a black, fiendish energy. Countless Jindan had died under their swords. Usually, a small wound that no one cared about would cause them to die. After this matter, this group of demonic cultivators that were specially raised and born with poison were called poison demonic cultivators. However, they also had great flaws. Since they grew up with poisonous insects and plants, their Ling energy was poisonous, and their Ling seas were filled with poison. So if it was a battle of cultivation, poison demonic cultivators of the same level usually only had half the Ling seas of normal Shouja of the same level. The higher the cultivation, the more obvious this weakness was. If the Ling sea was too small, and the Ling energy was not enough, it would be hard to survive the heavenly tribulation. Poison demonic cultivators were usually the strongest when they reached the Funshin stage. No one had heard of a Dongshu poison demonic cultivator in thousands of years. Meng Qi silently thought back to the records he had read about poison demonic cultivators. It was difficult for poison demonic cultivators to reach the Dongshu stage, but they were still a great threat to normal Shouja. Even the 10 great sects of the 3,000 worlds could not all have disciples that were experts. Yuanying and Fenshin Shouja were the true core of their power. When these Shouja faced poison demonic cultivators of the same level, even if the others' Ling Si was only half the size of theirs, they would usually be at a disadvantage. Ji Wuzhong nodded and raised his eyebrows. The Shouja who discovered this demonic cultivator squad clearly knew the power of the poison demonic cultivators. That's why he did his best to drag them to the crack in the barrier. As he spoke, he glanced at Meng Qi and said, "This person should be a rare genius among Shouja. Even though he is young, his battle power is unparalleled, and his cultivation is extremely high. The captain of the demonic cultivator squad is the son of the master of the demonic residence. He is also a little genius. He grew up with all kinds of compliments and did not put this young Shouja in his eyes at all. Because of his arrogance, he suffered a great loss. They clearly had more people, and his cultivation was the same as that Shouja. In the end, he was stalled by that person for 3 days and 3 nights. In the end, the reinforcements from the 3,000 worlds finally came. The only poison demonic cultivators self-destructed, but they still returned with heavy injuries. Meng Qi's gaze drifted into the distance. She imagined the fierce battle that year. Outside her sister's crack, there was probably a storm of blood and black clouds. And the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven faced the entire demonic cultivator squad alone. He actually managed to stall them with his own power. She could not help but slowly exhale. She did not dare to imagine what kind of terrible consequences would occur if those poison demonic cultivators really entered the cities of the 3,000 worlds. Later, the captain of the demonic cultivator squad, who was the son of the master of the demonic residence, died. When the news reached the MO world, the masters of the 4 great demonic residences who had always been in cahoots were all furious. It was just that the location of the boundary crack was hidden. It was in the mountains of the northernmost part of western Jia. There were few people there, and almost no Shouja went there. That's why the news hasn't spread yet, and no one knows who stopped that team of demonic cultivators. Meng Qi nodded. But it is not important now, Ji Wuzhong said. The masters of the demonic residences were not truly heartbroken over the loss of their sons. They mostly had dozens of children. In their long lives, they might have left behind hundreds of children. What they want is just an excuse. What I mean is, Ji Wuzhong glanced at Meng Qi. Regardless of whether they can find the Shouja who killed the son of the master of the demonic residence, they can use this as an excuse to shed all pretense of cordiality with the 3,000 worlds. Right now, they have not directly attacked the 3,000 worlds. It is only because the Starfall Sea is connected to the 3 realms but also suppresses the 3 realms. They have not been able to send large numbers of demonic cultivators to the 3,000 worlds. And Meng Qi nodded. She was still thinking about the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven. She had never seen this person before. However, it was not impossible to save a damaged inner core. In Meng Qi's previous life, she had once saved a young male Xiao who had just formed his core. His core had almost collapsed because of the collapse of his core. That person, When she thought of this, she could not help but frown. There was no need to mention what happened later. In short, a Jinan Shioja, who had just formed his core, would have an unstable inner core. Even if there was some damage, it would be easier to treat. The young master of Mirror Moon Heaven should be a profound emptiness realm Shioja. With Meng Qi's current cultivation, even if she knew what to do, it would be difficult to treat the other party. However, this method was rather special and could not be taught to others. Meng Qi frowned and instinctively reached out to draw casually on the bluestone table. Ji Wujiong did not say who the Shioja who stopped the small team of demonic cultivators was. However, it was obviously the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven. He knew so much about it. This matter was obviously not like what Li Che said. Only a few people knew about it. Meng Qi raised her head and glanced at Ji Wujiong. She opened her mouth, but in the end, she did not say anything. "What do you want to say?" Ji Wujiong said. "Just say it directly. I want to go see the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven." Meng Qi thought and then said, "However, I cannot go just like this." The young master of Mirror Moon Heaven was injured. As a medical shio who could pass the boundary of the Apricot Forest Great Competition, she was always welcomed. Then what? A man's wealth is his own ruin. Not to mention the broken space sect that was eyeing her covetously. Meng Qi knew very well that her cultivation was too low. Some people with bad intentions might be spying on her from the shadows, waiting for her to be alone and make trouble for her. "Oh," Ji Wujiong casually responded. "I know." He stood up and moved his arms. "Go to sleep first. I will call you at night." Meng Qi instinctively raised her head to look at the other. The eyes of the black-clothed youth were bright as he looked down at her. The corners of his lips rose slightly, carrying a careless and mocking smile. He did not seem to be surprised that Meng Qi returned to Mirror Moon City and wanted to see the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven. "Okay." Meng Qi exhaled and did not ask further. "It's time to let you know your master's abilities. Otherwise, little girl, you will always be unwilling to do it. Calling me master is more painful than asking you to save 10 people." Ji Wujiong reached out to touch his chin, then turned and walked toward a room in the courtyard. With his back facing Meng Qi, he waved his hand again. "Go to sleep." Meng Qi watched him leave. Her eyelashes trembled slightly, and a faint smile appeared in her eyes. She was actually not as reluctant as Ji Wujiong said. Calling him master was not as difficult as she imagined. Meng Qi watched the black-clothed youth open the door and then close it. She also stood up and returned to her room. The rooms in Rosy Lane seemed to be different in every city. The Westland was vast and rich in resources. It was richer than the Eastland. In addition, there were large sects here, such as the Medical Show's Wind Alliance, the Sword Show's Broken Space Sect, and the publicly recognized #1 Dharma Show sect in the Four Realms, Mirror Moon Heaven. They all had the intention of suppressing the other sects in the Three Realms. Even the rooms in Rosy Lane seemed more luxurious. Meng Qi lay on a soft bed. When she was in the East Land, she slept on an ordinary bamboo bed most of the time. Little Qi was also by her side. She opened her eyes and looked at the roof. She wondered how Qin Yanzhenjun was doing now. Meng Qi took out the Falling Cloud Manor Jade tablet that Yin Qinyin gave her from her storage bag. Her own Sky Beyond Heaven Jade tablet was left in the Falling Cloud Manor, and she couldn't find it in the end. She didn't know if she could find another one. Now that she couldn't go to the Falling Cloud Manor, she could at least go to Sky Beyond Heaven to take a look. The jade tablet in her hand gradually warmed up. Meng Qi turned over and pressed the hand holding the jade tablet to her chest. She slowly closed her eyes. Cultivators didn't need to sleep every day, especially when they were cultivating. It was just that she had just advanced to the nascent soul realm and used that method. At this time, her body was already very tired. She should have a good sleep. But as soon as she closed her eyes, Lin Yin seemed to appear in front of her again. This extremely beautiful senior doctor was clearly the strongest cultivator of her generation at that time. A profound realm senior doctor. Meng Qi turned over again. She was already a legendary, powerful existence who could revive the dead, but she still couldn't save her lover. Meng Qi was a little irritated, tossing and turning on the soft bed. She had thought of so many ways and spent tens of thousands of years preparing. Even if her body and Tao had disappeared, the will left in the world still insisted on doing this. Even so, she still couldn't do it. Senior Lin Yin was a Mahayana cultivator who had once touched the edge of the heavenly Tao with one hand. He was also a profound realm senior doctor who had already stood in the three realms of heaven, earth, and profound. Medical cultivators were somewhat different from other cultivators. Being able to set foot in the three realms of heaven, earth, and profound meant that they had already touched the essence of life. This was something that Senior Lin Yin couldn't do even if he tried his best and spent tens of thousands of years. Then, Meng Qi raised her hand with trembling hands. The heavenly Tao couldn't be disobeyed, let alone reversed. Then, how did she come back to life and even return to the past? She looked at her fair fingers. Her body was real, her skin was warm, and the blood and spiritual energy in her body were also real. Then, how did she come back to life? Meng Qi turned over again and carefully put away the jade tablet in her hand. This was the three realms. The heavenly Tao and time were together, surging forward. It was impossible to make an exception for a small cultivator like her. But she really came back to life again, and it seemed that even the legend of Lu Qing Ran being the child of destiny was broken. She used to think that she was lucky. Now that she thought about it, all the answers pointed to one person. Yun Qingyan, what sleep? Meng Qi suddenly shook her head and turned over to sit up. She sat cross-legged on the bed, and two Xian spirit stones jumped out of the storage bag and landed in her hands. She closed her eyes and clenched the Xian spirit stones with both hands. The spiritual energy in the Xian spirit stones followed the formation carved in her palms and flowed up the meridians in her arms. The spiritual energy contained in one Xian spirit stone was about the same as the spiritual energy in the spiritual sea of a first realm Mahayana cultivator. This was spiritual energy that Meng Qi could not bear. The three narrow black marks on her face instantly started to change, as if something was crazily surging under her skin and would break through her skin at any time and leave three scars on her cheeks. Ugh, Meng Qi groaned, cold sweat dripping down her forehead, and the back of her green robe was instantly soaked. All the meridians in her body, wherever the spiritual energy passed, seemed to be crazily cut by tens of thousands of small knives, almost like death by 1,000 cuts. The cultivation of a cultivator was going against the heavens. The cultivators of the three realms had been passed down for tens of thousands of years to have the current cultivation method. Meng Qi's method was a bit unorthodox. Compared to normal cultivators, not only was each cultivation like death by 1,000 cuts, the heavenly tribulation they had to face when they underwent tribulation would be more terrifying and powerful than normal cultivators. Her previous heavenly tribulation from Jindan to Yuanying was already so powerful, so unusual, that it even alarmed the elders of Jingyue Heaven. Those Dongshu cultivators would not show up for the heavenly tribulation of a normal Jindan. When Yuanying to Fengshan, it would be even more terrifying. If it went even higher, Fengshan to Dongshu, Ji Wujiang was so powerful, but he only dared to suppress his cultivation and waited until he entered the fallen star sea to undergo his tribulation. When he talked about others, he was extremely poisonous, but when he talked about his own matters, he was very casual. Meng Qi thought about it now. It should have been a narrow escape. After all, at the boundary of the great competition, Ji Wujiang was still arrogant. Later, when the final test of the great competition was mentioned from his mouth, it was easy, as if he and Meng Qi were just playing house. Don't think so much. Meng Qi calmed her mind and began to concentrate on cultivation. Her cultivation talent was not good. If it really went on like this, it would take her 40 to 50 years to barely touch the edge of the Dongshu realm. She wanted to complete the Dongshu realm and be qualified to touch the heaven, earth, and profound realms, but it would take her at least 100 to 200 years. 2 hours later, the two Xian spirit stones in Meng Qi's palms became dim. She opened her eyes and spat out a mouthful of black gas. Meng Qi looked down at her open palms. The 2 spirit stones in her palms turned into 2 small piles of white ashes. She waved her hand, and the ashes dissipated in the air. Her body tilted, and she fell on the bed. Her whole body was in so much pain that she could not even move her fingers. She looked like she was fished out of water, and her black hair was completely soaked in sweat. Even so, the 2 mystic spirit stones only increased her spiritual ocean by a tiny bit. It was a completely negligible amount. If she wanted to go from Yuaning to Fengshan, she would need at least 10,000 Xian spirit stones. At this moment, with a bang, the door was suddenly kicked open from the outside. Ji Wujiang strode in from outside. His face was darker than his clothes. Looking at Meng Qi, who was paralyzed on the bed, his brows were tightly knitted together. Ji Wujiang reached out and grabbed Meng Qi's wrist tightly. "Do you want to die?" With a flick of his hand, 2 shark pearls flew out from his storage bag and floated beside Meng Qi. An aura like the sea instantly filled the room, enveloping her whole body. "Didn't I just say? You just went through the tribulation. Don't be so anxious." Ji Wujiang's brows were tightly knitted together. "It's okay." Meng Qi calmed down for a while and finally could speak. She said slowly, I. She took a deep breath, and only then did she have the strength to continue speaking. "I'm a medical cultivator. I know what I'm doing." Ji Wujiang almost laughed out of anger. Okay. You know what you're doing." He tilted his head slightly and looked at the 3 black marks on Meng Qi's face that were even more obvious than before. "It's okay." Meng Qi reached out to support herself on the bed and slowly sat up. She reached out to tidy her hair indifferently and looked up at Ji Wujiang. "Are we going to moon mirror sky now? Can you still walk?" Ji Wujiang asked. "Yes." Meng Qi flicked her fingers and took out a porcelain bottle from her storage bag. She poured out a pill and swallowed it. "Wait for me for a moment." Ji Wujiang nodded. He crossed his arms in front of his chest and looked at Meng Qi sitting cross-legged. There were no lights in the room. Only the shark pearls emitted a lustrous light that shone on Meng Qi's elegant little face. TSK. The 3 scars on the little girl's face really didn't look good. He raised his hand and touched his face. However, Meng Qi had always been a little different. She really didn't care about her appearance. There were really countless beauties in the demon realm, even more than the Trichiliocosm and the demon realm. "Let's go." Not long after, Meng Qi opened her eyes and looked at the 2 shark pearls with some envy. 156 in net she also had to find a way to get 2 shark pearls. This thing was too useful, especially when used to treat internal injuries. Every medical cultivator should have a pair of sharp pearls. Meng Qi. Ji Wujiang's expression suddenly became serious. Moon Mirror Sky is not an ordinary sect. The injured guy must be surrounded by experts. After all, the demon realm is still looking for him, and the master of the demon mansion has offered a very high price to buy his life. So when the time comes, you have to listen to me. And Meng Qi nodded obediently. I know. On this point, Ji Wujiang was not worried about her at all. Meng Qi was sensible and obedient. When they fought side by side in the grand competition, he couldn't be more clear about it. Even if this girl's cultivation wasn't high enough and couldn't fight, she would definitely not let herself become a burden. So, Ji Wujiang paused, his expression still serious. Do you have enough Xian spirit stones on you? Meng Qi. Ji Wujiang coughed lightly. His face was a little more embarrassed than before. However, he quickly became serious again. He looked into Meng Qi's eyes and said righteously, "Give me some." Chapter 134. Meng Qi. She looked up at Ji Wujiang calmly with her clear eyes. The black-robed man did not look embarrassed at all. She was silent for a moment and took out a small brocade pouch from her storage bag. You want Xian spirit stones? Yes. Ji Wujiang became more confident. I'm at the profound void realm after all. To me, grade 9 and grade 8 spirit stones are meaningless. Therefore, as a profound void realm cultivator, no matter which realm he was in, he could be considered an expert. Experts shouldn't lack spirit stones. These thoughts flashed past Meng Qi's mind, but she did not complain directly. Ji Wujiang put away the brocade pouch and said, I know. I still owe you a lot of Xian spirit stones. I'll pay you back when the time comes. Let's go. He put away the brocade pouch and waited for Meng Qi to walk out of the door together. Mirror Moon Sky was like most sects in the 3,000 worlds. It was located outside Mirror Moon City. Do you know why Mirror Moon Sky is called the #1 Dharma cultivator sect? Meng Qi was already a nascent soul cultivator now. She was not slow and could walk side by side with Ji Wujiang. She heard the other party's question and shook her head. She asked casually, is the spell powerful? You can say that, Ji Wujiang said. Mirror Moon Sky is probably one of the ancient sects with the most complete inheritance in the 3,000 worlds. Meng Qi could not help but turn to look at Ji Wujiang curiously. This was the first time she had heard of this. Don't you know? Ji Wujiang's lips curled up. He looked slightly proud. Sects that could be named sun, moon, and stars are all passed down from ancient times. Then, Meng Qi asked, Falling Star Pavilion is the same? Yes. Ji Wujiang nodded. It's just that Falling Star Pavilion's inheritance is not as complete as Mirror Moon Sky's. I see. Meng Qi nodded again. Actually, the so-called inheritance can barely be considered the foundation of a sect. Ji Wujiang continued. In ancient times, there were countless experts in the 3 realms. Back then, there were far more magic arts than now. There were even more varieties of cultivation methods. Various sects and schools were like 100 blooming flowers. It could be said that there were more than 100 schools of thought contending. Yes. Meng Qi nodded. What happened next? Now, sword cultivation, dharma cultivation, and medicine cultivation are the main focus. Even master's array cultivation is rarely mentioned. Did something happen? Ji Wujiang glanced at her. Meng Qi always seemed very obedient when she was listening to stories. She would also obediently answer, which made the storyteller very happy. But what did he mean by your array cultivator? He raised his eyebrows and said snappily, It's also your array cultivator, Meng Qi. He casually took out an 8th grade spirit stone from his storage pouch and flicked it forward. The spirit stone was overflowing with spiritual energy, like a shooting star with a long tail, cutting through the silence of the dark night. Wherever the spirit stone passed, countless small figures drawn by light appeared in the night wind. Although they were very small and only flashed by. But when Meng Qi looked carefully, she could see that those little figures represented sword cultivators, dharma cultivators, and other cultivators. She found it interesting and couldn't help but smile. Is this also an array? No, Ji Wujiang said snappily. It's just a little trick. Meng Qi's heart moved slightly, and some blurry images flashed through her mind. She instinctively turned to look at Ji Wujiang. She was walking to the other's right, and could just see the black-robed youth's flawless right face. Previously, she could still be certain that she had never seen Ji Wujiang in her last life. But now, Meng Qi's brow furrowed slightly. She felt that she should remember something, but that blurry image flashed by so quickly that she didn't have time to catch anything. Ji Wujiang continued, Mirror Moon Heaven's inheritance from the ancient times is definitely one of the best in the 3,000 worlds. After 10,000 years, it is natural for it to become the #1 Dharma cultivation sect in the 4 realms. He said meaningfully, other than that, Mirror Moon Heaven should have other inheritances, other than Dharma cultivation. Meng Qi's heart suddenly jumped. She quickly turned to look at Ji Wujiang. The other was not a bad person, but he was definitely not a good person in the strict sense. Back at Falling Star Pavilion, didn't he? Don't look at me like that. Ji Wujiang snorted. Don't worry, I won't touch Mirror Moon Heaven. Why? Meng Qi instinctively asked. He didn't care about Falling Star Pavilion. So what was special about Mirror Moon Heaven to him? No reason. Ji Wujiang snorted again. In short, I won't touch them. And if you wanna, I can. He suddenly licked his lips and turned to look at Meng Qi. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts about their inheritance from the ancient times? They should also have a medical cultivation inheritance from the ancient times. Meng Qi. No, she said firmly. All right. Ji Wujiang nodded regretfully. It's good that you don't. or I might be in a bit of a difficult position. Then let's talk about something else, Ji Wujiong said. In Mirror Moon Heaven Gate, there is a secret place called 10 Extremes Mountain. 10 Extremes Mountain? Meng Qi's eyes suddenly widened. Is it the 10 Extremes Mountain that only Mahayana cultivators can enter to cultivate? You think too much. Ji Wujiong pursed his lips. Even if the ancient 10 Extremes Mountain still exists, it can't be owned by a single sect. However, you actually heard of the name 10 Extremes Mountain. That's quite impressive. Most of the time, he was exceptionally sharp-tongued, but he was especially different when it came to Meng Qi. Since he was prepared to accept her as his disciple in the barrier of the great competition, he basically did not mock and ridicule her like he did to others. There's a similarity? Meng Qi was slightly startled, and her footsteps slowed down. She thought for a while and asked directly, the ancient 10 Extremes Mountain, it said that only the top 10 cultivators with the strongest cultivation in the same era can enter. Once you enter the mountain, you have the opportunity to directly comprehend the Great Path, which is very beneficial for those who have attained the peak of Mahayana. What else do you know? Ji Wujiong asked. It said, the records of 10 Extremes Mountain that Meng Qi saw all came from a book in the sky beyond heaven and earth book house. At that time, she had completely read it. There were too many legends about the ancient times, some were true and some were false. Among the cultivators now, no one could tell which were true and which were false. Meng Qi originally did not take this name to heart, but now that she heard Ji Wujiong mention it, she suddenly remembered. It said that there are 10 peaks, and they are extremely dangerous. Even the strongest Mahayana cultivator can't use any techniques to climb them, and can only rely on himself to climb up step by step. Every step up is equivalent to going through a test. Meng Qi murmured, but once you can climb to the top of the mountain, even Mahayana cultivators can cross a small realm. Yes, Ji Wujiong nodded again. That's the ancient 10 Extremes Mountain. Although Mirror Moon Heaven's minor 10 Extremes Mountain is far from that powerful, there are also many benefits for nascent soul and Dongxu cultivators to enter it. There aren't as many minor 10 Extremes Mountains in Mirror Moon Heaven. It's just a mountain peak, and those who want to climb it will all be on the same mountain peak, so, Ji Wujiong said faintly, there's no prohibition on killing each other, and no prohibition on life and death. So that's how it is. Meng Qi nodded. No wonder Mirror Moon Heaven can become the #1 cultivation sect. So there's such a mystical secret place in the sect. No one has ever been able to reach the top of Mirror Moon Heaven's minor 10 Extremes Mountain. Ji Wujiong continued. It said that if one can reach the top of minor 10 Extremes Mountain, nascent soul cultivators can directly enter the Severed Soul stage. Severed Soul cultivators can advance by 3 small realms. Dongxu cultivators can advance by 1 small realm. Also, he paused, there's also another great benefit. What benefit? Meng Qi asked. No one knows, Ji Wujiong said, because no one has been able to reach the top. Even Mirror Moon Heaven's sect master doesn't know. He paused and then suddenly said, there are also people who say that if a cultivator fails to pass the tribulation, even if their inner core is damaged and their spiritual ocean is shattered, as long as they still have a breath left and can reach the top of minor 10 Extremes Mountain, they can repair their inner core and spiritual ocean, or even directly pass the tribulation. Not only can they recover their cultivation, they can also advance. I see. Meng Qi lowered his head and thought seriously. Then why don't they let their young masters enter minor 10 Extremes Mountain? Because... Ji Wujiong raised the corner of his lips, revealing a strange smile. After entering minor 10 Extremes Mountain, the people outside can't know what's going on inside. After leaving there, everyone's memories will be sealed by a strange power. You can only remember where you are, but not what happened inside. Simply speaking, in there won't be the slightest bit of morality of the outside world, and the restrictions of the sect rules. Ji Wujiong turned to look at Meng Qi. After all, Mirror Moon Heaven's young master was once an insightful emptiness realm cultivator. He can enter, but his cultivation is only equivalent to a Qi disciple cultivator. He definitely needs the help of his fellow sect members to climb minor 10 Extremes Mountain. He laughed again, his expression rather disdainful. Then, who will go? And how can we guarantee that in minor 10 extremes mountain with those rules, that fellow sect member won't have any thoughts of heresy? After all, Mirror Moon Heaven's young master is a famous genius. Once he recovers his cultivation, the position of Mirror Moon Heaven's sect master will definitely be his. Meng Qi raised his head and looked forward. They had already left Mirror Moon City for a while. At this moment, they could already see the blurry silhouettes in the distance. That should be where Mirror Moon Heaven's sect was located, the #1 magic cultivation sect in the 3 realms. They had an inheritance from the ancient times. This kind of sect that had lasted for 10,000 years would always have some special secrets and inheritances. Those secrets might only be known by the sect master. Maybe as long as one sat on the position of the sect master, they would be one step closer to the great Tao. Ji Wujiong laughed somewhat mockingly. If I were the sect master of Mirror Moon Heaven, I think I wouldn't be at ease either. He shook his head and said gloatingly, this kind of large sect, who knows how many schemes are hidden inside. His own son's great Tao almost collapsed for the sake of a 3,000 worlds cultivator. His own sect clearly has such a secret place, but he still doesn't dare to send him in. Being in a high position, he seems to be respected by everyone, but in the end, he doesn't have a trustworthy person he can entrust his life to. What a pity, it's also quite pitiful. Meng Qi. That shouldn't be the case entirely. With every sentence they spoke, they got closer to Mirror Moon Heaven. The blurry silhouettes in the night sky were also getting closer to them. The closer they got, the more they could feel the vastness of Mirror Moon Heaven's sect. Under the night sky, Meng Qi could even see the large area lying horizontally in front of them, where the sect was located like an incomparably huge, ferocious beast. As they got closer, clouds and mist filled the mountains. Even under the night sky, it looked ethereal like an immortal. Amidst the clouds and mist, the entire Mirror Moon Heaven was like a Longhuan palace built in midair. We're here. Ji Wujiong stopped talking about the 10 extremes mountain. With a few Xian spirit stones in his palm, he reached out and grabbed Meng Qi's wrist. Remember what you promised me. Listen to everything I say later. Okay. Meng Qi nodded. After Ji Wujiong finished speaking, he looked up at the sky. In the night sky, the stars were shining brightly. A full moon hung high in the sky, and soft silver moonlight sprinkled down, as if a layer of gauze was draped over Mirror Moon Heaven. Fellow Taoist, please wait. Before Meng Qi and the others reached Mirror Moon Heaven, 2 cultivators wearing dark brown Taoist robes suddenly appeared in front of them. Fellow Taoist. The cultivator on the left politely saluted the 2. Ahead is where my sect is. Outsiders are not allowed to enter. Please wait. After that cultivator finished speaking, he raised his head and looked at the 2. His gaze landed on Meng Qi's face, and he suddenly exclaimed softly, "This is Meng Qi, fellow Taoist Meng?" That Mirror Moon Heaven disciple asked softly with uncertainty. "I'm Meng Qi." Meng Qi returned the salute. "It really is fellow Taoist Meng Qi." That Mirror Moon Heaven disciple took a step forward. "Does fellow Taoist Meng still remember me?" As he spoke, he looked at Ji Wujiong. "This is fellow Taoist Ji Wujiong." Ji Wujiong raised his eyebrows. "This is getting more and more interesting. Who would have thought that the barrier of the Apricot Forest Medical Cultivator Competition is not the medical cultivator's own secret place? It turns out that various forces have already infiltrated it. Broken Space Sect, Mirror Moon Heaven, fellow Taoist Ji, you must be joking?" That Mirror Moon Heaven disciple was one of the Dharma cultivators who fought side by side with Meng Qi in the second trial of the grand competition. He saluted the 2 of them again. "That day when we fought side by side, I was amazed by the strength of the 2 of you. There's always someone better than you, I'm not lying." As he spoke, he couldn't help but look at Meng Qi. "Fellow Taoist Meng, were you invited here by the elders of your sect?" "Aye, that's right." Before Meng Qi could finish speaking, Ji Wujiong interrupted him. He flicked his finger, and a somewhat strange object flew out of his palm. That object flew back and stopped in front of the Mirror Moon Heaven disciple. Under the moonlight, Meng-Chi could clearly see that it was a crescent-shaped token. It was sparkling and translucent, looking exceptionally exquisite. "Can you bring us in now?" Ji Wujiang asked again. "Yes." That disciple hurriedly saluted the two of them respectfully. He didn't even dare to reach out and touch the crescent-shaped token, allowing Ji Wujiang to take it back with a wave of his hand. The two disciples whispered a few words, and the disciple who had been talking to Meng-Chi said to the two of them again, "Please follow me." Meng-Chi looked at Ji Wujiang in surprise. The black-robed youth met her gaze and raised his eyebrows proudly at her. Previously in the city, Ji Wujiang didn't say that he had Mirror Moon Heaven's token. Moreover, he didn't come during the day and insisted on coming in the middle of the night. Meng-Chi felt that this matter wasn't so simple. However, the two of them had already agreed that after arriving at Mirror Moon Heaven, they would listen to Ji Wujiang for everything. Meng-Chi silently followed behind the Mirror Moon Heaven disciple, paying attention to the situation around them. As soon as they entered Mirror Moon Heaven, it was as if they stepped into moonlight. The silver moonlight was like mercury flowing down the ground, and the surroundings were light clouds and mist. Meng-Chi was clearly already in Mirror Moon Heaven, but she couldn't see as clearly as when she was standing outside. Under their feet, a path paved with blue stone led straight ahead. The three of them were clearly walking on flat ground, but with every step forward, it was as if they had reached a higher place. Not long after, Meng-Chi felt that she was already halfway up the mountain. She could see that there were shorter mountains beside her, and it could be considered that all the other mountains were small. After walking for a short while, a straight mountain peak appeared on their left. That mountain was like a sharp sword, piercing through the clouds. It looked very close to them, but Meng-Chi knew that without the permission of Mirror Moon Heaven's master, no matter how they walked, they wouldn't be able to get close to the mountain peak. Was this Little 10 Extremes mountain? She glanced sideways and carefully sized up the mountain peak for a moment. Ji Wujiang noticed her gaze and followed her gaze. Then he nodded lightly at her. Meng-Chi took back her gaze. There didn't seem to be anything strange about the mountain peak. It was just that it seemed to go straight up and down. If Xiaozhi didn't use spells, it really was hard to climb. There were trees on the mountain, but there were very few. Most of the places were bare, revealing the dark brown walls of the mountain. The Mirror Moon Heaven disciple leading the way didn't turn back and maintained the same speed as he walked in front without a word. By Kyuj Novel Reading Network. After a while, Meng-Chi felt her vision brighten. The end of the neat bluestone path suddenly became an open flat ground. In the center of the flat ground, a small mountain rose from the ground. The mountain wasn't high, and there were many corridors and palaces. "Sirs, this way, please." The disciple led the two to the back of the mountain, and then stepped onto another small path that was also paved with bluestone. The small path was still flat as it led forward. Similarly, every step Meng-Chi and the others took, they would take a step up. Moreover, she found that the small mountain was far bigger than what they had seen. After just a few steps, they saw more palaces than before. Each of these large sects had their own wonders, so Meng-Chi didn't find it strange. Her heart moved slightly, and she looked at Ji Wujiang again. In the past, she didn't know how this was done. But now, Meng-Chi looked around. These sects that had been passed down from the ancient era had formations all over every blade of grass, every tree, every brick, and every house. In the ancient era, formation cultivators should really be like what Ji Wujiang said. They didn't lose to spell cultivators and sword cultivators. "We're here." Soon, the disciple led the two to an independent pavilion halfway up the mountain. "Please wait a moment." After he finished speaking, the door of the palace-like three-story pavilion opened without any wind, and the disciple quickly walked in. Meng-Chi looked back and found that the bluestone path had already been covered by clouds, so she couldn't see the situation at the foot of the mountain. After a while, the disciple returned to the two of them. "Fellow Taoist Meng, fellow Taoist Ji, Uncle Master invites you in." Meng-Chi nodded at him. "Thank you." Ji Wujiang winked at her again and walked in first. Meng-Chi followed behind him. She had no idea what Ji Wujiang wanted to do, but it should be related to the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven and Mirror Moon Heaven's Little 10 Extremes Mountain. The door of the pavilion closed behind the two of them, and Meng Qi's eyes suddenly lit up. The place they were in now was more like a large hall. The entire hall was built with large pieces of white stone, which made it look very grand and spacious. Several pearls were inlaid on the stone walls, and the light from the pearls was enough to illuminate the entire hall. Other than some simple tables and chairs, there were no other decorations, and it looked like a snow cave. Deep in the hall, on a high platform, a middle-aged man in a dark blue robe sat cross-legged. Hearing the two of them coming in, the middle-aged man opened his eyes and looked over. Meng Qi was startled. The middle-aged man's gaze was gentle, and he didn't look like a cultivator, but more like an ordinary elder. She also couldn't sense the aura on his body. Presumably, this person's cultivation level must be much higher than hers, which was why she couldn't sense it at all. Fellow Taoist Meng Qi. The middle-aged man smiled. Fellow Taoist Ji. Senior. Meng Qi bowed obediently. Ji Wujiang didn't look much older than her, but the way he addressed her was obviously different. This was normal. After all, Ji Wujiang was already an insightful emptiness realm expert. At his cultivation level, age was no longer important, and strength was the only thing that mattered. I heard from the disciples of the sect what the two of you did in the apricot forest barrier. The middle-aged man was Mirror Moon Heaven's sect master, Yin Shunbei. He stood up and walked toward Meng Qi and Ji Wujiang. Especially Meng Qi. He looked at Meng Qi with a smile. Congratulations on passing the test of the apricot forest barrier and receiving the recognition and inheritance of the ancient great doctor, Senior Lin Yin. Thank you, Senior. Meng Qi said, I was just lucky. Lucky. Yin Shunbei smiled again. There are thousands of cultivators in the three realms. From the core formation realm to the core formation realm, the heavenly tribulations follow one after another, and each tribulation is stronger than the last. Most cultivators like me just want to be blessed by providence. You don't have to be modest. Yin Shunbei was quite polite to her, and Meng Qi more or less knew why he was being so polite. In fact, based on the actions of the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven, even if Yin Shunbei wasn't so polite to her, Meng Qi would have cured him if she could. If my son wasn't seriously injured, he should also be in the apricot forest this time and see you pass the test with his own eyes. Yin Shunbei continued. His tone was indifferent, and there was no fluctuation in his tone when he mentioned his seriously injured genius son. Meng Qi's heart moved slightly. She didn't expect him to say this so frankly. As a friend of Senior Lin, since you came to Mirror Moon Heaven, you must have come for my son. Meng Qi. She couldn't cure the young master of Mirror Moon Heaven now. The difference in cultivation was there. The other party was seriously injured and his cultivation had regressed to the Qi refinement realm, but he was still an insightful emptiness realm expert. Meng Qi had just advanced to the nascent soul realm, and she wanted to repair her inner core. This kind of cultivation gap couldn't be made up for by medical skills. She was about to explain, but Ji Wujiang spoke first. That's right. We came for your son. Yin Shunbei smiled calmly and went straight to the point. His inner core was damaged, and now his cultivation is like a Qi refinement realm disciple. I'm ashamed to say that as the sect master of Mirror Moon Heaven, I have some friendship with the sect masters of the major medical cultivation sections. Ever since my son was injured, my old friends have come to treat him many times, but unfortunately, Yin Shunbei's eyes dimmed, but he soon smiled at Meng Qi. If you can cure him, as an insightful emptiness realm cultivator, I will do my best to satisfy you. So he was an insightful emptiness realm cultivator. No wonder I couldn't sense his cultivation at all. Meng Qi said silently in her heart. She understood Yin Shunbei's words. He definitely wanted to cure her son. The young master of Mirror Moon Heaven was not only Yin Shunbei's son, but also a rare genius. In the tens of thousands of years of the 3,000 worlds, there were only a handful of people who could become insightful emptiness realm cultivators in their 20s. But Yin Shunbei also made it clear that he would do his best to repay Meng Qi. But Mirror Moon Heaven wouldn't. He seemed gentle and polite to Meng Qi, but in fact, he was still somewhat guarded against them. Meng Qi didn't say anything. She promised Ji Wujiang that she would listen to him in Mirror Moon Heaven. She immediately turned to look at the black-robed man. Ji Wujiang's hands were in his sleeves, and he was looking at Yin Shunbei lazily. He didn't look like an insightful emptiness realm cultivator. Instead, he looked like a lazy idler. She's only a nascent soul realm cultivator with 4th-grade medical skills. She can't save her son now. Yin Shunbei, Meng Qi. Both of them looked at Ji Wujiang curiously. So, what happens next? Unless you let her go to the 10 Extremes Mountain. Ji Wujiang said slowly, word by word. Oh? Yin Shunbei didn't seem surprised at all. He just smiled faintly. So the two of you came for the 10 Extremes Mountain. As he spoke, he returned to the high platform in the main hall and sat down. He looked at Meng Qi and Ji Wujiang calmly. You should know that once you enter the 10 Extremes Mountain, you'll be responsible for your own life and death. Mirror Moon Heaven won't be responsible for the two of you. She's only a nascent soul realm cultivator, and her future is limitless. Do you really want to go? You don't have to worry about that. Ji Wujiang smiled lazily. We have our ways. Okay. Yin Shunbei only hesitated for a moment, then nodded. He sighed softly. The 10 Extremes Mountain opens once every 10 years. The world always thinks that Mirror Moon Heaven doesn't like outsiders to participate. They don't know that I don't like it, but that doesn't mean I don't like it. His gaze was still gentle. He said to Meng Qi, killing is not prohibited in the 10 Extremes Mountain. Once you leave there, all your memories will be sealed. No one will know what will happen in the mountain. Cultivators stronger than you can do things to you that they don't dare to do in the 4 realms. Even if you die in there, no one will know who did it, let alone what happened before you died. Furthermore, this isn't a game, and it's not a trial. Once you enter, unless someone can reach the peak or wait for the 10 Extremes Mountain to close by itself after 49 days, no one can stop you midway. So, Yin Shunbei said slowly, that place is the cruelest and coldest Azura field. Do you really want to go? His tone didn't change at all from when Meng Qi and Ji Wujiang had just entered. It was still so calm and gentle, like the most benevolent elder teaching the younger generation. However, Meng Qi felt a chill run down her spine. She and Ji Wujiang looked at each other. The 10 Extremes Mountain, if she could reach the peak, then she would be able to enter the spirit's severing realm. Even if she couldn't, if she could come out alive in the end, she could always raise her cultivation by a few small realms. However, as this Mirror Moon Heaven sect master said, that place was the cruelest and coldest Azura field. What if she couldn't come out alive? Meng Qi was a bit hesitant. She still wanted to live. She still had very important things to do. For a nascent soul cultivator like her, this kind of dangerous place was probably the real Azura field. She was afraid that once she stepped in, her life and death would be hard to control. Just as Meng Qi was hesitating, the door of the Great Hall opened again. A Mirror Moon Heaven disciple walked in and reported respectfully, Sect Master, the new Sect Master of the Broken Space Sect, Senior Ling Ji, has personally arrived. Oh? Yin Shunbei's expression was still that calm. Please. Chapter 135. As soon as Meng Qi heard the words space-breaking sect, she instantly became alert. She slowly clenched her left hand, and a few Xian spirit stones silently appeared in her palm. The Xian spirit stones were smooth and warm, and they gently rubbed Meng Qi's palm. Ji Wujiang, who was standing next to her, also raised his hand slightly. He narrowed his eyes, and his gaze became extremely cold. Yin Shunbei, who was sitting on the main seat, glanced at the two of them indifferently. His gaze quickly went past Meng Qi and looked behind her. The door behind them opened again, and footsteps were heard. Even without turning around, Meng Qi could feel an inexplicable aura suddenly rising in the main hall. The aura was not sharp, nor was it oppressively powerful, but it was completely impossible to ignore. The footsteps gradually came closer. They were neither fast nor slow, and the newcomers were very calm. Meng Qi could clearly hear that there were two people slowly walking in. She still did not turn around. She only narrowed her eyes slightly, and her long eyelashes trembled slightly, covering the light in her eyes. Ji Wujiong was originally standing to the right of Meng Qi. He slightly bent 3 fingers of his left hand, which was hanging by his side. The sleeves of his black robe moved without wind, and the sleeves of his robe brushed against the back of Meng Qi's hand. A slightly cold little thing was stuffed into Meng Qi's hand. The thing was very hard, but it was round and smooth like a small pearl. Just by holding it, she seemed to feel the surging power from the sea, which came and went like the tides, rising and falling. A sharp pearl? Meng Qi's gaze moved slightly, and she held the sharp pearl even tighter. The sharp pearl was also a kind of natural treasure. It took 100 years to form a prototype, and it usually took 1,000-year-old sharp pearl to have a miraculous effect. It was very rare and rather magical. The sharp pearl contained the essence of the tides and waves. If it was placed in a room, it could release an endless aura of the sea to help a seriously injured person heal. If he threw out the mermaid pearl and shattered it with his spirit chi, he would be able to release the power of the surging waves in an instant to obstruct the enemy and buy some time for the owner to escape. The Broken Space Sect was the #1 sword cultivation sect in the Western Kingdom. With the sect master personally coming, even Ji Wujiong was not confident that he and Meng Qi could escape unscathed. Therefore, he gave the mermaid pearl to her first. At the critical moment, even if it was just a breath's worth of time, it could still turn the situation around. Meng Qi's eyelashes fluttered. She had seen the sharp pearl in Ji Wujiong's hand many times. When she was injured during the tribulation, it was this sharp pearl that had comforted her and healed her. Zaya shooting. See, this was a 3,000-year-old sharp pearl, which was even rarer. She clenched the round bead in her hand even tighter. The footsteps behind her had already reached her side. The sleeves of the blue robes brushed past her, and the 2 Xiozha of Broken Space Sect walked past her. As if they didn't see Meng Qi, they walked past her and went straight to Yin Shunbei. Meng Qi raised her eyes and looked at the backs of the 2 people. The man walking in front had a small black crown on his black hair. He was tall and wore a wide blue robe that was tied up by a dark blue belt. Just by looking at his back, the man with the wide sleeves looked quite dashing. The oppressive aura when he entered the sect before seemed to be an illusion. Meng Qi couldn't even feel the slightest bit of sword energy on him. He looked like an ordinary middle-aged man. Other than his tall figure, there was nothing special about him. This was the new sect master of Broken Space Sect? Previously, Su Junmo said that the Broken Space Sect hadn't had a new sect master for 10 years. She didn't expect that they would choose a new sect master so quickly. This Xiozha must have something out of the ordinary. Behind the blue-robed man was a young male Xiozha. He wore a dark red Xiozha robe, and his hair was tied up meticulously. From Meng Qi's angle, she could see the other side profile. His eyebrows were high, his nose was high, and his facial features were deep, as if they were carved by a sword. He looked quite fierce. He was different from the blue-robed man. When he passed by Meng Qi, the sword energy on his body surged, and he couldn't completely restrain it. Meng Qi narrowed her eyes. Her fingers that were holding the sharp pearl slightly tightened, and she gripped the round pearl even tighter. She definitely wasn't a match for this young male Xiozha alone. Not to mention, there was also the sect master of Broken Space Sect whose cultivation she couldn't detect at all. How has Brother Yin been? The person who came was Ling Ji. He raised his hands towards Yin Shunbei. His tone sounded quite familiar with the other. It's been 3 years since we last met. Brother Yan's cultivation has really improved by leaps and bounds. It seems that you've already touched the edge of Truth Realm 5. Meng Qi glanced sideways and exchanged a look with Ji Wujiong. She slowly took a step back, and her gaze drifted towards the window on the left side of the hall. The fact that the Broken Space Sect was looking for her had caused an uproar in the 3,000 fields. Meng Qi had also thought about what she should do if she met a disciple of the Broken Space Sect. With Ji Wujiong by her side, she wasn't too worried. However, she never expected that the first person she would meet would be the sect master of the Broken Space Sect. She had always been self-aware. Even if it was a sword cultivator of the same realm, she couldn't defeat them. Since this sect master knew that sect master Yin was at Truth Realm 5, his cultivation wouldn't be weaker than Yin Xuanbei's. It might even be higher. Meng Qi relaxed her breathing and slowly took a step back. Xiao Ran, who was standing behind Ling Ji, suddenly turned his head and quickly glanced at Meng Qi. The young man had handsome features. His long red robe made him look even more tall and straight. His clear eyes swept across Meng Qi's face curiously, but no hostility could be seen. "Let's go!" Ji Wujiang's voice suddenly sounded. He pressed his right hand on his chest, and a narrow black blade instantly appeared in his hand. Ji Wujiang stepped forward and blocked in front of Meng Qi. He reprimanded in a low voice again. "Let's go first." Meng Qi was startled. She rushed toward the window that she saw earlier. Someone chuckled behind her. The laughter was quite joyful, and there was no sarcasm in it. With a whoosh sound, a narrow, seemingly transparent long sword suddenly appeared in front of Meng Qi, firmly blocking her path. Meng Qi suddenly stopped. She was about to crush the sharp pearl and throw it out. The silver medicine knife instantly floated out from the storage bag. She clenched the Xian spirit stone in her left hand. She was just about to throw out the sharp pearl, and then she would grab her medicine knife. The long sword floating in front of Meng Qi trembled slightly, and suddenly moved forward as fast as lightning. Clang, clang. Two soft sounds rang out. Meng Qi didn't see what happened at all. In that instant, she felt a huge shock in her chest. Her arm holding the medicine knife was burning hot, and the medicine knife almost flew out of her hand. It turned out that in that instant, Ling Ji had already controlled his seemingly transparent long sword to knock on Meng Qi's medicine knife. It was clear that he had shown mercy. Meng Qi's arm trembled a few times, but the medicine knife was still in her hand. It wasn't knocked away. She was startled. Her cultivation was naturally far inferior to this broken space sect master. If he really wanted to deal with her, he didn't even need to use his natal long sword. He probably could completely crush her with a finger. But now his sword didn't hurt her. It seemed that at least he didn't plan to take her life here. Brother Ling, Yin Shunbei, finally spoke. "These two young friends are my Mirror Moon Sky's guests." He slowly stood up and took a step forward. Hearing this, Meng Qi turned to look at Yin Shunbei. From the moment they entered this hall, the other party's attitude was always gentle, as if he was the kindest elder in their sect. There wasn't any sharpness to be seen. At this moment, Yin Shunbei took a step forward. His long robe fluttered without wind. He was like a deep pool, and his aura as the sect master of the #1 spell cultivation sect in the 3,000 worlds was undoubtedly revealed. This was Mirror Moon Sky after all. Yin Shunbei didn't do anything. A powerful aura came down from above, stunning everyone in the hall. Meng Qi's medicine knife was still in her hand, but she couldn't even move a finger. The sharp pearl in her palm could be thrown out with a raise of her hand. She couldn't even open her fingers. Meng Qi took a deep breath. The two people in the hall were really too strong. This kind of difference in cultivation was really impossible to make up for. Meng Qi looked at Ji Wujiang. The black-robed youth stood tall. The narrow knife was already in his hand, but he looked about the same as her. The amethyst 8 trigrams disc floated beside him. The natal magic treasure that was usually lively and active and would never stay there quietly was now quiet and obedient. It didn't move at all. The youth brought by the sect master of the Broken Void sect was also about the same as Meng Qi. He stood there in a daze and didn't even summon his natal sword. Only Ling Ji. He chuckled. With a wave of his sleeve, his natal sword returned to his side. That narrow and thin sword looked like a transparent sword. The tip of the sword trembled a few times and let out a soft wung sound. It was clearly the first time she saw that sword. For some reason, Meng Qi felt that she could feel the other party's excitement at this moment. Her gaze followed the sword and slowly turned to Ling Ji's face. This new sect master of the Broken Void sect looked unexpectedly young compared to Meng Qi's expectations. His jet black hair was meticulously tied up on top of his head by that small black crown. Just by looking at his face, Ling Ji looked at most 30 years old. He didn't even look much older than the disciple he brought. But if one looked at Ling Ji's eyes, one would find that he was indeed not young. Although his eyes were also very bright, they were not the same as the eyes of a young person. There were traces of time in his eyes, which made his eyes not as bright as a young person's eyes. But Ling Ji was very good-looking. His facial features were handsome. Even though he was older, he looked even more charming. Even in the cultivation world where there was no lack of beauties, he could be considered as an absolutely handsome man. Ling Ji's body clearly did not carry a trace of sharp sword aura. Even his smile carried a bit of carefree laziness. But when that transparent sword hovered beside him, it made him appear very dangerous. That feeling. It was as if this person was a sword that had not been unsheathed. But everyone who saw him knew that once the sword was unsheathed, it would definitely be peerless and would shock the world. Meng Qi's heart skipped a beat. An insightful truth realm expert with a dangerous sword in his hand. This person's entire sect is looking for me. Her breathing became rapid. Meng Qi was not afraid of death before. Of course, she was willing to live well. She was a medical cultivator. Her respect and love for life had always been real. But if she really encountered danger, she was also brazen and fearless. But now, she wanted to live well. She still had very important things to do. Things that she had to do even if she had to do her best. Ling Ji looked at Meng Qi quietly. His gaze finally landed on her elegant little face and met her clear eyes. Meng Qi. His tone was indifferent. With a light flick of his finger, his life sword suddenly disappeared. Brother Ling, Yin Shunbei, took another step forward. Brother Yin, don't worry. I have no ill intentions towards this. Ling Ji turned his head, and a lazy smile appeared on his lips. Towards this little friend Meng Qi. Meng Qi pursed her lips. Just as the two of them were talking, her fingers seemed to be able to move again. She slowly raised her hand and gripped her medicine knife tightly. The 10 Extremes Mountain is about to reopen. Yin Shunbei slowly walked towards Meng Qi. Little friend Meng was invited by me to participate in the 10 Extremes Mountain. Oh! Ling Ji raised his eyebrows. Brother Yin personally invited a nascent soul cultivator? He smiled playfully. Is it for your son? Yin Shunbei nodded slightly and said, my son is seriously injured. The doctors of the 3,000 worlds are powerless. Little friend Meng has inherited Senior Lin Yan's legacy. If he can pass the test of the 10 Extremes Mountain, my son may be saved. Oh! Ling Ji smiled lazily and waved his sleeve. Brother, Yin means that Jinji Weixin wants to protect the person my void-shattering sect wants? It's not Jinji Weixin, it's me. Yin Shunbei's tone was still indifferent. His expression looked no different from before. Even his gaze did not change, but the atmosphere in the entire hall seemed to have changed. Brother Yin and I have known each other for 70 years. We have fought many times since the core formation stage. Ling Ji was still smiling. I am inferior to Brother Yin in core formation and nascent soul. After spirit severing, my life-bound sword was formed. I have never lost to spirit severing or insightful emptiness. He looked lazily at Yin Shunbei. Now that you and I have reached insightful emptiness, we have not sparred for many years. Why don't we try it today? Hearing this, Meng Qi took another step back. There was no room for them to interfere in a fight between two insightful emptiness elites. Right now, they were in Jinji Weixin. Even if sect leader Yin was not this void-shattering sect leader's match, he would not be in too much danger. She instantly understood this and slowly took another step back. Forget it. But before Yin Shunbei could speak, Ling Ji said lazily, I have sparred with you so many times. There is no point in sparring again. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Yin Shunbei. Also, I know that you were injured in your early years. Although it seems fine, your foundation was damaged. I do not want to have an unfair advantage. Ling Ji said slowly. Why don't we change the way we play? Ling Ji's tone was relaxed. It seemed that he was very familiar with this Jinji Weixin sect leader. What do you want? Yin Shunbei seemed to be very familiar with the tone of this old opponent. My disciple, Qiao Ran. Ling Ji suddenly patted the shoulder of the young man beside him. Although he is not as talented as your son, he is diligent. He barely reached insightful emptiness realm. Meng Qi turned to look at the young man. He looked to be about 27 or 28 years old. She did not expect him to be an insightful emptiness realm cultivator. But she also knew that there were many geniuses in these large cultivator sections. It was not surprising. Greetings, sect leader Yin. Qiao Ren quickly went forward to greet him. Yin Shunbei nodded slightly. He still did not understand what Ling Ji meant. The 10 Extremes Mountain is about to reopen. Why don't we make a bet? Ling Ji crossed his arms lazily in front of his chest. Even his posture was more relaxed than before. He turned to glance at Meng Qi and continued to look at Yin Shunbei. According to the agreement, the 10 Extremes Mountain will reopen once every 100 years. Each of the 10 great sects of the 4 realms can send one person to participate. However, only insightful emptiness realm cultivators can enter. That's right. Yin Shunbei sat back in his seat. His expression became calm again. Ling Ji no longer attacked Meng Qi. He also became that kind elder again. Even when facing Ling Ji, who seemed to have ill intentions, he was very kind. The Broken Space sect wants him to participate? That's right, Ling Ji said. Oh! Yin Shunbei nodded slightly. According to the rules, the 10 great sects of the 4 realms should choose 3 disciples. Finally, before the 10 Extremes Mountain reopens, the strongest disciple will enter the 10 Extremes Mountain. Right now, I have the final say in the Broken Space sect. Before Yin Shunbei could finish, he was interrupted by Ling Ji. He waved his hand and said carelessly, "Otherwise, what's the point of me working so hard to get the sect leader position?" Even Meng Qi could not help but smile. This sect leader Ling Ji was quite similar to Ji Wujiang. Qiao Ran lowered his head. He did not dare to look at Yin Shunbei. The sect leader position was snatched. Was it really okay to talk about this in front of the sect leaders of other sects? Little girl, what are you laughing at? Ling Ji's eyes were sharp. He still saw the smile that flashed across Meng Qi's face. Do you think that I shouldn't have snatched the sect leader position? How Senior does things has nothing to do with me, Meng Qi said politely. Heh. Ling Ji flicked his sleeve and did not say anything more. Your Mirror Moon Sky can let 3 people enter. This little girl counts as 1. You can also let 2 disciples enter. You have the advantage in numbers. However, I can still take this loss. Let's bet on whose disciple can climb higher when the 10 Extremes Mountain reopens. How about it? Ling Ji said. Sure. Yin Shunbei replied indifferently. Then it's settled. After the 10 Extremes Mountain reopens, the one who climbs higher will be the winner. Ling Ji said, whoever wins, this little girl belongs to that person. The other person cannot interfere. Sure. Yin Shunbei nodded again. Senior. Meng Qi took a deep breath. He suddenly asked, what if I'm the highest? Hee. Ling Ji chuckled. He turned to look at Meng Qi and sized her up. What? Little girl, do you want to bet with me too? Since the 2 seniors are using me as the wager, I'm destined to only be a part of it. If I'm just a wager, it's too miserable. Meng Qi's expression was calm. She looked at Ling Ji fearlessly. She understood that if the Void Breaker sect really wanted to find trouble with her, even if she had Ji Wujiang's help and a powerful expert like Ling Ji, she still wouldn't be able to avoid it. Since the other party did not want to take her life right away, she could take the gamble. Sure. Ling Ji's eyes were smiling. He asked with interest, what do you want to bet? I hope that Senior Sect will not find trouble with me before I advance to the insightful emptiness realm. Meng Qi said, sure. Ling Ji did not even think about it. He nodded and agreed. He agreed too quickly. Meng Qi felt a little uneasy. The Void Breaker sect was looking for her with great fanfare. Even the new sect master of the Void Breaker sect came personally. Was he really so easy to talk to? Then it's a deal. Ling Ji looked at Meng Qi's suspicious face. He flicked his finger, and a small sword the size of a palm appeared in front of him. If you're still worried, This is for you. Xiao Ran, who was standing beside him, looked up when he heard this. He suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. However, under the pressure of his master, he did not dare to say anything. Then, Xiao Ran heard Ling Ji say, "We can let Sect Master Yin be the witness. I will seal this item with my divine sense. As long as you come out of the 10 Extremes Mountain and win against them, it will be yours." After Ling Ji finished speaking, he tapped the small sword a few times with his finger. The small sword was enveloped by a layer of clear light. Soon, it became dark again. Ling Ji handed it to Meng Qi. The dark small sword was heavy in his hand. It did not look very eye-catching. However, it looked ancient and seemed to have been around for a long time. Meng Qi's heart skipped a beat. He grasped the small sword and nodded. Then he put it into his own storage bag. Then this matter is settled. Everything will wait until they come down from the 10 Extremes Mountain. Ling Ji said, "I'll take my leave first. Brother Ling, why don't you stay in the sect? The 10 Extremes Mountain will be open soon." Yin Shunbei said, "That's fine too." Ling Ji nodded. "I can't let you stay for free." As he spoke, he threw out a small brocade bag. Yin Shunbei took it and looked at it. Suddenly, his expression changed slightly. He had always been calm and collected, but now, he stood up and solemnly bowed to Ling Ji. "Thank you, Brother Ling." Ling Ji only nodded slightly. Then, he turned and walked out of the hall. Meng Qi watched him leave. He kept feeling that this sect master of the Broken Space sect was a bit strange. Soon, only the three of them were left in the hall. Yin Shunbei held the brocade bag in his hand. He stood there in a daze. No one knew what he was thinking. After a while, he came back to his senses and said to Meng Qi, "Little friend Meng Qi, about the 10 Extremes Mountain he paused at this point. The 10 Extremes Mountain was too dangerous. However, Meng Qi was probably one of the medical cultivators in the 3,000 worlds who had the most hope of saving his son. "Sect Master Yin, I want to go." Meng Qi knew what he wanted to say. Her tone was firm. "Even if you don't let me go, I will think of a way to secretly enter the 10 Extremes Mountain." She couldn't care so much now. She only wanted to become stronger as soon as possible. As long as she could become stronger, she would dare to go to more dangerous places. "All right," Yin Shunbei said. "In that case, please stay in the sect. The 10 Extremes Mountain will be open at any time in 10 days. No one knows what will happen after entering the 10 Extremes Mountain. However, I, Mirror Moon Heaven, have been the guardian of the 10 Extremes Mountain for 10,000 years. I will tell you everything I know. Besides," he pondered for a moment and said, "I have a small magic treasure here. I used it when I was in the nascent soul stage. I haven't used it for many years. Although it's not very useful, among the magic treasures that nascent soul cultivators can use, its defense is passable. I'll give it to you." As Yin Shunbei spoke, he gave the magic treasure to Meng Qi. It was a small jade pendant in the shape of a crescent moon. It was slightly warm to the touch. "You don't have to be so polite." Yin Shunbei saw that Meng Qi didn't accept it and said, "This thing is useless to me." Besides, he sighed lightly. "Although my son is destined to face this tribulation, I still hope that he can return to the ranks of cultivators." "Then, thank you, Senior." Meng Qi put away the jade pendant and bowed to Yin Shunbei. Soon, Mirror Moon Heaven disciples came to take Meng Qi and Yin Shunbei to the guest room to rest. Along the way, Meng Qi didn't see any other Mirror Moon Heaven disciples. They continued to walk up the mountain path and soon arrived at the guest house. It wasn't far from the hall where they met Yin Shunbei. The disciple who sent them here bowed and left quickly. Yin Shunbei gave the two of them an independent courtyard. The decorations were quite elegant. Meng Qi and Ji Wujiang sat facing each other in the courtyard. She first took out the jade pendant Yin Shunbei gave her and looked at it for a moment, then took out the small sword Ling Ji gave her. "What is this?" she asked Ji Wujiang. "Humph." Ji Wujiang glanced at the item and snorted lightly. "This sect master of Broken Space sect is too arrogant. He thinks he's going to win for sure. He's willing to give this to you. No wonder people always say that old 7 of the Broken Space sect is terrifyingly arrogant. He's the most arrogant sword in the 3,000 worlds. He paused and then said, "This is one of the tokens of the Broken Space sect. Although it's not as good as the sect master token, none of the sect's disciples will dare to do anything to you if you have it." Meng-Chi tilted her head slightly. "He's a Paradise Realm elite. If he really wants to deal with me, will sect master Yin fall out with him on the spot for me?" "I'm afraid not." Ji Wujiong's expression darkened slightly, but he agreed to make a bet with me and even used such an important item as a token. Meng-Chi rested her chin on her hand. "He's definitely not as simple as being arrogant." "What are you trying to say?" Ji Wujiong looked at her. "Anything is fine." Meng-Chi put the small sword back into the brocade pouch. "So I'll definitely come out of the 10 Extremes mountain and work hard to climb to the highest point." As she spoke, she turned to look to the left. From the corridor they were in, they could see the 10 Extremes mountain, which was located in the center of the Mirror Moon Sky sect. Meng-Chi felt a little regretful. It was a pity that her Sky Beyond Heaven Jade pendant was not with her. Otherwise, she could go to the library in Sky Beyond Heaven and maybe find some information about the 10 Extremes mountain. As she thought, she put the jade pendant Yin Shunbei gave her into her storage brocade pouch and tidied up her own storage brocade pouch. Meng-Chi's expression changed slightly. She suddenly took out a small jade pendant from her storage brocade pouch and almost jumped up. "This is my Sky Beyond Heaven Jade pendant that you're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.